Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Brittany Tavar. Compassion is a valuable quality that not everyone has. It's understandable why some people hesitate to help strangers. Our story today illustrates the potential consequences of compassion mixed with misplaced trust. 45-year-old Brittany Tavar lives far away from her family and doesn't keep in touch. She rarely shares her experiences or seeks advice from loved ones, nor does she receive much support from them. Many people say she is a helper. Unfortunately, this trait led her to a tragic situation. After finishing school, Brittany dreamed of becoming an actress, so she headed to Hollywood, hoping to pursue her dream of a film career. However, she was unable to achieve her dream of becoming an actress. Brittany then returned to St. Augustine. She decided to become a real estate staff while also working part-time as a photographer. Brittany spent a lot of time exploring the city, looking for real estate for her clients, and taking architectural photos. This new path proved to be much more successful than her acting aspirations. She gained clients and later collaborated with many clients. Over the years, Brittany established herself as a popular real estate staff. She earned enough money to buy a nice house and lived a quiet, peaceful, but somewhat lonely life. The beach club became her second home, where she enjoyed singing by the beach and hanging out with a group of friends. On July 6, 2010, she followed her usual routine and then met up with friends in the evening. Brittany was friendly and seemed to be having a good time. However, she did not intend to stay long and left the party around 9:00 p.m. On her way home, she stopped at a nearby gas station to get gas. For the next 2 days, Brittany's family and friends were unable to reach her. They called and texted, but she did not respond. Her friends were very worried. Brittany was known for being punctual and responsible, so her sudden disappearance was unusual. Although she could have gone somewhere for work, she always informed her friends of her plans. Worried about her safety, several friends, including her best friend Brenda, went to her house to check on her. At this time, her family too were worried about her not responding to their calls and texts. When her friends arrived at Brittany's house, they immediately noticed that her car was not in the driveway. From the outside, Brittany's house looked completely normal. There were no signs of forced entry or anything that would indicate a search. Her friends started knocking on the door, but no one answered when they knocked. Brittany, who lived with 2 dogs and 2 cats, surprisingly, the dogs were gone with her, while the cats were still in the house. It was unthinkable that Brittany would leave her pets alone for so long without arranging for someone to care for them. Brittany's friends then contacted her sister to share their concerns. They decided to go into the house to feed the cats and investigate further. For convenience, they called a locksmith to help them unlock the door. Once inside, the first thing they noticed was the unusual level of cleanliness. Normally, Brittany's house would have some clutter due to her living with animals, but now it was spotless and sparkling. The air was filled with a strong smell of cleaning products. The cats were very hungry. Brittany's house was unusually cold, and the air conditioning was running at full blast, much to her friends' surprise. She was known to be frugal and would not leave the air conditioning on when she was away. Ultimately, Brittany's friends could not make sense of the strange details they noticed, so they went to the nearest police station to report her missing. The police were initially unconcerned, citing the usual excuses. They stated that as an adult, she had the right to manage her own time and was not required to inform anyone of her whereabouts. Brittany's family, which includes 3 brothers and a sister, hired a private investigator to investigate, and the family also contacted the police. Several police officers went to Brittany's home to assist in the investigation. The police conducted a thorough search, but they found no useful information. When the police looked into her personal life, they learned that Brittany did not appear to have any enemies and had no connections to the criminal world. She was known to be kind, decent, and generally stayed out of trouble. However, Brittany often discussed her problems with a woman named Anne. Initially, their relationship was warm and friendly, but eventually turned hostile. According to her family, Brittany welcomed Anne into her home, which demonstrated her generous nature, as she often helped others in need. Witnesses noted that the two women often argued and even fought, leading to significant conflict between them. Brittany went to court to obtain a restraining order against Anne because she felt threatened by Anne's behavior. She believed her life was in danger and wanted to settle the dispute legally. She gathered all the necessary documents and evidence to support her case. Interestingly, she disappeared the day before the hearing was set to begin. This was particularly puzzling to those who knew her, as it seemed unlikely that she would vanish right before such an important event. Brittany had been determined to address this issue and had prepared extensively, so it was hard to believe she would willingly miss her own court hearing. After learning about Brittany and Anne, the police suspected that Anne might have been involved in the incident and wanted to question her to find out what had happened between her and Brittany. The police quickly called Anne in for questioning. Anne explained that she had housing problems and that she and Brittany had been friends who supported each other at work. However, things changed when Anne's boyfriend planned to visit from Ireland. He had come to the United States with the intention of finding a job and living with Anne. The search for housing began at this point. Anne reached out to Brittany, hoping she could provide a room for a while for herself and her partner, even though they were essentially strangers to Brittany. Initially, Brittany agreed to help her friend, but after some time living together, she changed her mind. Brittany confided in her friends that the couple was very difficult to live with, which created significant tension between the two women. Their friendship started to deteriorate quickly. The situation escalated into a fight, leading to Brittany's arrest after Anne called the police. Brittany claimed that the fight occurred because the couple refused to leave her home, and that Anne and her boyfriend attacked her, forcing her to defend herself. Brittany spent the night at the police station and received a suspended sentence, along with requirements to attend anger management classes and complete community service. Additionally, she was ordered to stay away from Anne and her boyfriend. Surprisingly, Anne chose to remain nearby, and she and her boyfriend joined the beach club Serenade, where they intentionally showed off in front of Brittany. What once were friends became enemies. Brittany accused Anne of acting provocatively and aggressively, claiming that Anne was intentionally trying to provoke her, which led Brittany to seek legal protection. To support her claims of threats from Anne, Brittany started carrying a small video camera to capture evidence. The hearing was scheduled for the day after Brittany was last seen at a party. Witnesses confirmed that after leaving the party, she intended to go to a gas station and then return home. Brittany did not plan to go anywhere else. She hadn't consumed alcohol and left early to prepare for her court appearance. The hearing aimed to establish a permanent restraining order against Anne, who had been stalking Brittany. Given the circumstances, Anne had a motive to harm Brittany to avoid facing consequences in court. When questioned by police, Anne remained calm and cooperative, but insisted that she had nothing to do with Brittany's disappearance. She also provided a solid, verifiable alibi. Police were not quick to eliminate Anne as a suspect because they had no other leads. Then a major breakthrough came in Hopkins, South Carolina. 2 dogs belonging to Brittany were found wandering around different neighborhoods across the city. The dogs had tags on them, and when scanned at a veterinary clinic, it was discovered that they were from Florida and belonged to Brittany. After examining her dogs, no other important clues to the investigation were found. Both dogs were taken to a shelter. The search for Brittany continues. By this time, the police had learned that for over 10 years, Brittany had provided temporary shelter to at least 8 people struggling with housing and other life challenges. Brittany did not charge them rent. Instead, her guests helped with housework, cleaning, cooking, and gardening. Unfortunately, her generosity may have attracted dangerous people. The last person she took in was Joseph Dean Roberts, 26, whom Brittany had met just weeks before she went missing. They met at a local bookstore, where she realized he needed help. Joseph quickly shared his heartbreaking story during a brief conversation with Brittany. He explained that he had become homeless after losing his job at a nearby gas station. Brittany, known for her kindness, offered him a temporary place to stay in her home so he could get back on his feet. In exchange, she simply asked for his help with household chores. Several friends of Brittany's met Joseph, and she introduced him at the beach club Serenade. Everyone described him as a modest and pleasant young man who seemed friendly and calm. Joseph shared that he had endured harsh treatment from his parents since childhood and openly recounted his difficult life. His situation was complex, leading him to live on the streets, but he was determined to persevere. He saw Brittany as a true savior. She even bought him a computer to help him develop his web design skills and offered her assistance with her work. However, as the police began to investigate him, he appeared increasingly suspicious. A few days after Brittany went missing, he was stopped for speeding while driving her vehicle in Evanston, Wyoming. After speaking with the police, they found no evidence to charge Joseph, so he was released. As police examined the final days of Brittany's life, Joseph's behavior raised more suspicions. Consequently, he became the primary suspect in her disappearance. His actions and his relationship with Brittany were concerning, which drew the police's attention for multiple reasons. Joseph was the last known person to see Brittany alive on the evening of July 6th, after returning from a party. It is believed that Brittany returned home after a visit to a gas station. Alarmingly, Joseph used Brittany's car right after she went missing. The police began investigating his activities for more information. On the same day, he was spotted in Olmar, where he bought several items, including a tent, a black t-shirt, and shorts. This raised suspicion because Joseph had no money, no job, and no permanent residence, making it odd that he could afford new clothes immediately after Brittany's disappearance. Police discovered that the payment method used for certain purchases was Brittany's bank card. This indicated that he had stolen from her. They decided to investigate the transactions made with this card more closely. It became apparent that after Brittany went missing, he frequently used her card across multiple states. At this point, Joseph had fled, prompting police to issue a public alert through the media, warning that Joseph could be armed and dangerous. At this point, everyone was hopeful that Brittany would be found alive. The search for Joseph took longer than expected, creating urgency for Brittany's safety. As time passed, the likelihood of her being alive decreased. During this period, her family and friends pressured police to act quickly, fearing that any delay might jeopardize her life. Later, Joseph was arrested for petty theft in Seattle. Police, who were focused on searching for Brittany, were notified of Joseph's arrest and quickly traveled to the city to question him as a potential kidnapper. People still hoped that Brittany was still alive and in custody. They speculated that Joseph's purchase of a tent might indicate that he had hidden her from the city. During questioning, Joseph revealed a shocking truth. He said that on July 6, 2010, shortly after Brittany returned from a party, they got into an argument. Brittany insulted Joseph, accusing him of being unhygienic and smelly, and he claimed she was being very rude. This angered Joseph, causing him to lose control. In a fit of rage, he grabbed a hammer and hit Brittany in the head multiple times. Joseph said Brittany did not die from her injuries. Instead, she fell to the floor, bleeding and still breathing. Joseph then walked into the kitchen, grabbed a large knife, and returned to kill Brittany. After committing the crime, he quickly began cleaning up the crime scene. He disposed of all the evidence by throwing it in the trash. To clean up the blood, he used cleaning supplies found in the house. Initially, he thought about hiding Brittany's body in the attic of the house, but he was unable to carry her up the stairs. He then wrapped the body in bed sheets. Before dawn, he placed her body in the trunk of Brittany's car to avoid attracting the attention of the neighbors. He then planned to drive far away from the crime scene. When asked by the police why Joseph took the dogs out of the house and chased them away, but left the cats alone, he mentioned that the dogs might attract attention. So Joseph decided to take the dogs with him when he hid the body. He left the cats behind because they were well behaved and could roam the streets freely, so he was not worried about them. He believed that the cats would find food and would not attract attention. After cleaning up, Joseph put the 2 dogs in the car and drove to Lysistrata, near Highway 95. Once there, he took Brittany's body into the woods, intending to bury her. However, Joseph did not have the proper tools and could not dig a grave by hand, so he decided to leave Brittany's body in the ground, believing that it would soon be eaten by a wild animal. On the way back, Joseph released the 2 dogs onto the road. He then returned to Brittany's house and went to bed. In the morning, he realized that Brittany's family and friends would soon start looking for her. He decided to escape in her car. He took all the money and valuables in the house, along with her card. He had known the password to the card for a long time because he had used it many times to buy groceries. He traveled across several states to avoid the police. Then, when he ran out of money and tried to steal from someone else, he was discovered and arrested. Police focused their search on Brittany's body. Joseph pinpointed the location of the body on a map, just a few hundred yards from Highway 95. Her body was later found, but it was badly decomposed, making identification impossible. The only way to confirm her identity was through dental records, which later confirmed the body was Brittany's. The medical examiner noted severe head trauma caused by a blunt object and a knife wound causing injury to the neck. When Brittany's family learned what had happened, they were stunned. Joseph, who Brittany had helped, had murdered her. Friends and family had warned her that it could be dangerous, but Brittany was confident that she could avoid dangerous people. Tragically, her instincts had led to disastrous consequences. Not long before Brittany disappeared, she confided in her friends that Joseph was starting to annoy her. When she returned home, she found him going through her belongings, and she noticed that small amounts of money were missing. They often argued, and Brittany considered kicking him out, but she never got the chance. Meanwhile, the police were investigating Joseph's troubled past. They discovered that he had been dishonest with Brittany. He was actually homeless. He had been living in a tent at Brody Beach, Florida. He was skilled at presenting himself as a victim and manipulating others. She had invited him to live in her house, as he appeared to be a nice and honest young man who openly discussed his mental health issues. However, shortly after moving in, his behavior changed drastically. He began to neglect his personal hygiene and started using illegal drugs in his room. When Brittany found out, she asked him to leave. However, instead of leaving, he decides to confront Brittany, ultimately leading to her death. After Joseph confessed, he was quickly arrested for first-degree murder with aggravating circumstances. Although he claimed to be insane, a mental health evaluation determined that he was competent to stand trial. This led to a new legal battle, with both the defense and the prosecution making strong arguments. Joseph's mental health was a contentious issue, raising the possibility that he could evade punishment and instead be sent to a treatment clinic. As a result, the lawyer and the prosecutor came to an agreement. Joseph accepted the plea deal, agreeing to plead guilty to the lesser charge of second-degree murder. As a result, Joseph Dean Roberts was sentenced to 30 years in prison. Brittany's family felt the sentence was too lenient for the severity of the crime, but their efforts to appeal the verdict were unsuccessful. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Justice Garrett. Justice Garrett, a teenage girl from Florida, USA, suddenly disappeared after school. As police investigated the case, they discovered the motive and the horrific events surrounding her disappearance. They were increasingly shocked by the brutality of the perpetrator, the most brutal in the history of the county. It had been just 3 weeks since Justice's 16th birthday. That day, she had overslept and woken up later than usual, causing her to miss the school bus. Her mother, Danielle, then 37, was busy getting her 5-year-old daughter ready for kindergarten and couldn't help Justice get to school. Danielle believed Justice could handle herself. Justice was going to return home by the school bus in the evening as usual. But she didn't return home at the scheduled time. Initially, Justice's family wasn't concerned because she had many friends and often stayed late with them after school. However, as time went on and she still hadn't returned, her mother and stepfather began to worry. They assumed she might be spending the night at her best friend's house. Since they needed to wake up early for work, they went to bed without waiting for her. But when morning came, Justice still hadn't returned home. Danielle grew impatient and worried about her daughter's whereabouts. Unable to reach Justice by phone, Danielle decided to contact the police for help. The police took the missing person report seriously and began an investigation. Police checked out places where Justice might have been, as they often see teens staying with friends before returning home. However, Justice's mother sensed something was wrong because Justice had not contacted family, which worried her. Police considered the possibility that Justice might have run away. Danielle said Justice often spent weekends with friends, and she often helped her mother take care of her younger sister and would not disappear without telling anyone. Justice always dealt with her problems instead of running away from them. And she always discussed any difficulties with her mother. Danielle was worried because all Justice's belongings were left at home. She believed something terrible might have happened to her daughter, so she insisted on starting the search right away. Despite the police's reassurances, Danielle's anxiety grew. Her daughter had never hung out with bad friends, and it was unusual for her to run away or avoid problems. Even when she was with friends, she would call her parents to let them know. However, she did not return any calls or texts. She was friendly and sociable, and did not use drugs or alcohol. It seemed completely impossible that she would just run away without telling anyone. Police checked Justice's database and confirmed her mother's story. She had no criminal record and there were no reports of her being in an accident. Police began searching for Justice by interviewing several teenagers, classmates, and acquaintances. Some said they had seen her sleeping in the cemetery, while others said she had moved in with a secret boyfriend. In fact, Justice had no boyfriend and had never been to the cemetery. None of these claims were true. Police interviewed everyone who knew Justice, including her teachers and classmates. They discovered that she had not been to school that morning. A review of surveillance footage along Justice route and a check of her phone's geolocation showed that she left home around 7:25 a.m. to go to school, but she disappeared about 30 minutes later, on her way to school. What happened to Justice during that time? For days after she went missing, on April 17th, a man called the police. While out jogging, he noticed a strange, unpleasant odor coming from the edge of the trail, which piqued his curiosity and prompted him to head toward the woods. After walking a few meters, the man accidentally discovered a body. He then called 911. The police quickly arrived and discovered a female body that showed signs of severe decomposition. Although there was some minor damage caused by animals and the hot and humid weather, most of the damage was caused by a chemical substance. Forensic experts determined that it was a type of bleach that had been poured on the victim's body, likely to cover up the evidence. The identity of the deceased could not be determined on the spot and laboratory analysis was required. However, the police suspected that this could be Justice, the person everyone was looking for. Police confirmed the identity of the body as Justice after DNA analysis. Her body was found in a wooded area near Delanda, about a 30-minute drive from her home in Sorrento. Her upper body was badly decomposed, exposing her bones. Her lower body was less damaged, suggesting that she had been exposed to fewer chemicals. Although the exact cause of Justice's death could not be determined due to the condition of her body, it appears that she died from strangulation. Evidence showed that her pants had been pulled down to her ankles and her sweater pulled up to her neck, suggesting that a sexual assault had taken place. Unfortunately, bleach destroyed much of the evidence, making it difficult to prove this motive. It was clear that she had suffered multiple blows to the face, as her nose was broken in several places. Police interviewed the jogger who discovered the body and reported it at 9:11 a.m. He provided important information about the incident. The jogger said that on the 16th, while running on the trail where the body was later discovered, he noticed another person in the distance. He believed it was a man based on his build, but he was unable to provide further details because the person ran away when he heard the jogger approaching. This unusual behavior caught the jogger's attention, but he did not go any closer to the area or see the body that day. However, he returned several days later when he noticed a foul odor. The investigation confirmed that the jogger was not involved in the incident. He passed a lie detector test and had an alibi for the day Justice went missing. To gather new information, police carefully reviewed surveillance camera footage along the entire route Justice took, especially at the bus stop where she was supposed to board. Justice's mother initially claimed that her daughter had walked to school by herself. However, police soon discovered that this was not true. In fact, her stepfather, Robert, had offered to drive Justice to school that morning. Police were suspicious of Danielle's lie about how her daughter got to school, so they approached her more cautiously. This time, she changed her story, admitting that Justice had not walked alone. Robert had driven her in his car. She explained that she had lied because Robert's driver's license had been suspended and she feared he would punish her if she told the police the truth. And that Danielle thought her little lie wouldn't get in the way of finding her daughter. Unfortunately, the deception in this case made it difficult for the investigation to piece together what really happened. The police requested the school's surveillance camera footage, which covered the parking lot. This is the location where Robert was supposed will drop her down. However, the camera was malfunctioning at the time and no footage was recorded. Therefore, it was impossible to confirm whether Robert dropped Justice off or not. However, multiple witnesses reported that Justice did not come to school and that no one had seen her that day. The only person confirmed to have seen Justice alive was Robert, and only he knew what really happened. The police brought Robert in for questioning. Eventually, he began to talk. On the day of the incident, Robert claimed that he never took Justice to school. Instead, he drove her to a nearby town at her request and dropped her off at the entrance of the town so she could meet a male friend. Robert suspected that this friend might be her secret boyfriend, whom she was dating without her mother's permission. In order to build a better relationship with Justice and gain her trust, Robert decided to comply with her request. However, Robert did not know the name or any details about the friend Justice was meeting. Justice then assured Robert that she could get to school by herself and planned to return by bus, so he felt that everything was fine. He could not wait for her because he had to go to work in the Volos district, and he did not have much time. Unfortunately, Danielle and Robert were unable to provide any useful information. The police then turned to Justice's friends, who all confirmed that she had recently started talking about a guy she met online. He had shown a lot of interest in her and texted her frequently, which she shared with her friends. However, Justice felt uncomfortable with his excessive attention and her friends believed that Justice would not date him. The police examined the Justice's social media accounts, looking closely at her likes, comments, recent subscriptions, and conversations. They discovered one account that had been in frequent contact with Justice over the past few months and showed various activities related to her. This account belonged to an 18-year-old man, whose profile picture featured a muscular young man. He had been flirting with Justice, expressing interest in getting to know her, and complimenting her. Despite mentioning that he lived nearby, police were unable to find anyone who looked like him, and none of her friends recognized him. Justice did not respond to his persistent messages, choosing instead to ignore him. However, police believe the social media account is crucial to solving the case. Police then conducted a thorough search of his social media accounts. They discovered a phone number associated with his account, but instead of belonging to an 18-year-old, it was registered to a middle-aged man named Robert Kern, Justice's stepfather. This revelation shocked the police. When they approached Robert again, he, who had initially been cooperative, suddenly changed his attitude and refused to communicate. The police were determined to find answers, especially since Robert had lied, and now all the evidence pointed to him as the prime suspect in Justice's murder. Despite his protests, police arrested Robert Kern. However, social media interactions are not sufficient grounds to charge someone with murder. At the time, Robert was very close to the family, as he had been dating Justice's mother since the previous fall. He often stayed overnight at their home and kept in close contact with the entire family. There was no evidence of inappropriate behavior toward Justice. Robert denied any wrongdoing and dismissed the idea that he had harassed Justice. He suggested that his frequent compliments were meant to encourage Justice, arguing that receiving attention from a man could be a compliment. However, this explanation seems implausible, as Justice ignored his messages and she thought he was weird for discussing him with her friends. The police, looking for evidence against Robert, decided to interview Justice's close friend, Rachel. Rachel explained that their friendship had recently become close, as Justice often stayed overnight at her house. Rachel mentioned that a few months before the tragedy, Justice had stayed so often that it aroused suspicion. It seemed that Justice was trying to avoid going home. Robert had also been staying at Danielle's house quite often in recent months. Could his presence have contributed to Justice's reluctance to go home? Rachel reported that Justice had spent nearly a month at her house in the weeks before her death. She observed that Justice had become increasingly anxious. Previously calm, she now flinched at any accidental touch and implied that she was afraid of Robert, her stepfather. Rachel recalled seeing Robert on the day Justice disappeared. She described him as looking very uneasy, to the point where she actually felt scared. This made her understand why Justice liked to stay at her house every night. Police decided to take a closer look at Robert's background, focusing on his social media interactions and cell phone calls. What they discovered was disturbing. Robert had a significant criminal record, including 2 burglaries dating back to the early 2000s. Recent search history showed that he had looked up drugs that could cause unconsciousness, such as chloroform, and that he had purchased the drug. He also spent a lot of time studying maps, especially the nearby woods, likely in search of a suitable place to hide a body. He also researched methods for disposing of evidence. After learning that bleach had been used on Justice's body, police ran a geolocation check on Robert's cell phone on the day Justice went missing. They discovered that he had not been driving and had not dropped Justice off at a bus stop or school. Instead, Robert went into a wooded area where Justice's body was later discovered. Police reported that Robert's cell phone was not working for about an hour during this time. Initially, Robert claimed that he was on his way to work, but this was false. In fact, he took Justice into the woods, where he attacked, raped, and killed her. Justice was later charged with murder and was held in custody until his trial began. The exact motive behind the crime was never revealed, as Robert did not reveal it until the very end of the trial. The prosecution argued that the crime was murder with the intent to commit rape. Robert chose not to testify in his own defense during the trial, but he never admitted to any wrongdoing. However, the prosecutor's office had enough evidence to charge him with murder. Robert's troubled criminal history was presented during the trial. He was first arrested in May 2019 in New York State on fraud charges and was held in the county jail. It was mentioned that in 1999, he had committed burglary and breaking and entering, which resulted in an 18-month prison sentence. 3 years later, he was arrested again for burglary and served a year in prison. The prosecution later proved that Robert's testimony was completely false. He mentioned that he dropped Justice off near the school early in the morning and that he worked as a carpenter. However, both of these statements were proven to be lies. After being caught lying, Robert tried to create more excuses. But they were all designed to fool the police. They were able to accurately track the movements of both Robert and Justice. They compared the timestamps on Robert's cell phone and the searches on his phone, which showed that he had been planning the crime for a long time. The prosecution argued that Justice had no chance of surviving from the beginning because Robert had intended to kill her. Vegetation from where Justice's body was found in Robert's car, although he claimed he had never been in the area. However, he had in fact been there at least twice after the murder. He returned to the location on April 16 to pour a chemical on the body to destroy evidence of the crime. At that time, he was spotted by a jogger. The prosecutor's office attempted to prove that Robert's actions were sexually motivated, arguing that he had intentionally kidnapped Justice in order to rape and harm her. Robert had been keeping tabs on Justice for a long time, and she tried her best to avoid him, so she was rarely home. Danielle Justice's mother was devastated by her daughter's murder. In her testimony, she said that Robert had discouraged her from calling the police immediately after Justice's disappearance, convincing her that Justice was just staying at a friend's house. He also pressured her to lie, claiming that Justice had gone to school by himself. At first, the Danielle did not understand why he made such demands, thinking that he was afraid of the consequences of driving without a license. After reviewing the case documents, the jury reached its decision in just 30 minutes. They found Robert Kern guilty of first-degree murder of Justice Garrett. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, plus 5 years for attempting to obstruct the investigation. Throughout the trial, he never admitted his guilt and showed no remorse for his actions. Despite the overwhelming evidence against him, he maintained his innocence until the very end. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Sidney Powell. Brenda Powell was born in 1969 in Saline, Agua, USA. She graduated from high school and then attended Akron University. After completing her studies, she began working as a pediatrician in the oncology department of her local children's hospital. For over 28 years, she has dedicated herself to helping sick children. Brenda oversees inpatient care and is known to her peers and hospital staff as a calm, quiet person who is exceptionally kind to both patients and their parents. In November 1996, Brenda, 27, married Stephen Powell and took his last name. They were introduced through a mutual friend who worked with her at the hospital. The couple enjoyed a happy life together for 23 years and welcomed 2 children. A daughter named Sydney and a son named Andrew. Since childhood, Sydney has been passionate about sports, especially football. Her family watched football together every Sunday, which helped strengthen their relationship. They also regularly visited the beach and Disneyland. As Sydney grew older, she and her mother, Brenda, began to spend more time together. While her father and brother watched football, they enjoyed shopping, which further strengthened their relationship. Sydney did well in high school, which helped her pass her exams and gain admission to Mount Union University, where she also received a scholarship. In college, she became friends with Lauren and a group of female students while living on campus. She participated in school events and was introduced to many different activities. Friends described Sydney as friendly and easygoing. Sydney's academic journey took an unexpected turn after her first year. Initially, everything seemed fine. She excelled in her classes and was praised by her teachers, ranking among the top students. Sydney began working part-time during the summer holidays to earn extra money. However, during her second year, Sydney faced significant challenges and decided to move off campus. Her friends were initially confused by this sudden decision but later learned that Sydney was struggling academically. Her grades were dropping. Additionally, Sydney began sleeping excessively, often around 16 hours a day. Sydney's friends thought she could handle it all because she was a smart and hardworking student who had previously done well in school. Unfortunately, Sydney struggled and ended up failing 3 out of 4 exams. Due to strict regulations, she received a notice of expulsion from the university, which shocked everyone. Sydney was worried and shared her concerns with her friends. Fortunately, they informed her that she could reapply for admission. At the beginning of 2020, Sydney resumed her studies, attending classes and sorority meetings. She happily told her friends that she had been readmitted to the university and was doing well. In early February, Sydney was notified that she had to leave the school permanently and that her expulsion would remain in effect. She was offered assistance with moving and packing, and the school planned to notify her parents of her situation to help cover her expenses. However, Sydney told the school administration that her family already knew and did not need to be contacted. This was not true, and she was afraid that her parents would find out about her expulsion. During this time, she told her parents that she was doing well in school and had good grades, and that she had even won a scholarship. Her parents trusted her and had no reason to doubt her. After being evicted from campus, Sydney left but did not return home before the end of February. Instead, she stayed with friends in various hotels, paying in cash to avoid being tracked and to keep her situation at the university a secret. Although she worked part-time to support herself, her earnings were insufficient. Sydney constantly searched for online opportunities to make money but could not find a full-time job that would provide adequate support. She continued to live in hotels or with friends, afraid to go home. She cut back on everything and often did not eat enough. Eventually, she decided to return home, claiming that the campus was closed for renovations. She told her parents that she would stay with them while she went to college and still work. Her parents believed her and thought everything was fine. Sydney has been lying to her mother by saying that she is fine. Recently, Brenda has noticed some strange changes in her daughter's behavior. She discovers that Sydney is spending more time at home and not going to school, which raises concerns. This information later comes to light because Sydney's entire family uses the Life 360 app, a mobile phone location tracking app on a map for safety, allowing family members to know where each other are. On February 25, 2020, Brenda received a notification from the app that Sydney had stayed home all day instead of coming to college as scheduled. This worried Brenda, who was concerned that something was wrong. She contacted her daughter to find out what was going on. Sydney replied that she had a week off because her teacher was absent. She mentioned that students were given assignments to complete at home and were participating in remote learning. However, Brenda began to doubt Sydney's story. She told her daughter that her explanations did not seem right and reminded her of the importance of good grades to maintain her scholarship and graduate, which would affect her future job opportunities. She also emphasized the importance of attending school regularly. Sydney then reassured her mother that everything was fine and that she should not worry. The deception continued. On March 2nd, Sydney texted her mother, saying she was going to school and would be back by 2:30 p.m. Instead, she spent time with a friend, watching TV, while lying about her college situation. During this time, the parents noticed that something was wrong. Their daughter did not receive the scholarship, so her father, Stephen, had to pay her tuition. He tried to send money through the payment gateway, but could not complete the transaction because he had lost access to his account. Initially, He suspected a technical problem and decided to wait. However, when Stephen logged in on March 3rd while working at a metallurgical plant, he was still unable to complete the transaction. He then asked his daughter about the problem. Sydney reassured him not to worry and promised that she would look into the matter and resolve it. Stephen realized he could not delay any longer as the deadline was near, and he needed to pay for his daughter's studies quickly. He decided to contact the university himself to resolve the situation. When he called, the staff checked their records and informed him that Sydney was not listed as a student, meaning her access had been revoked. Stephen was shocked and thought there must be some mistake. He requested they verify the information again, and they confirmed that Sydney had indeed been expelled. However, the university staff would not disclose the date of her expulsion, citing confidentiality rules. Stephen used a tracking app to locate Sydney, who was supposed to be in class. Instead, he discovered she was at home while he was at work. He wanted to go home to talk to her, but he feared she might track his movements and run away. To avoid this, he left his phone at work and headed home. Before leaving, he called Sydney to gather information, but she avoided giving clear answers. During the conversation, she admitted that she was struggling at university and didn't like it there. However, she continued to lie, not confessing that she had been expelled a long time ago. Instead, she claimed she had just not been attending classes. Stephen was troubled by his daughter's situation. He believed she was capable and had a bright future ahead, but he worried that her lack of commitment to attending classes could hinder her progress. He wanted to talk to her about the issue so they could find a solution together. On his way to work, Stephen called Brenda to inform her about their daughter's learning difficulties. Although Brenda suspected something was wrong, she hoped it was not true. Throughout the call, Stephen was concerned about Sydney's situation. However, Brenda reassured him. With a background in psychology, she had a skill for helping others and wanted to use her experience to support their daughter. She promised Stephen that she would take time off work, go home, and have a calm and open discussion with Sydney to ensure that they could all make the best decision together. Brenda then tried to contact the school but was unsuccessful. She left a voicemail asking for a call back and then went home. When Brenda reached her private entrance, she told her husband what had happened and went inside. Meanwhile, teachers Michelle and John received Brenda's message and called her back within the hour. At approximately 12:36 p.m., Brenda answered the phone and spoke calmly to the teachers. Everything seemed normal until Brenda started screaming into the phone, followed by a series of noises. Michelle and John, who were listening on speakerphone, were confused about what was happening but sensed that something was wrong. Michelle and John were worried about what had happened and tried calling Brenda again, but she did not answer. After several tries, a woman finally picked up at 12:40 p.m., but it wasn't Brenda. The teachers recognized Sydney's voice and asked to speak to her mother, but the call suddenly ended. This situation made Michelle and John suspicious. They decided to contact the local police to check on Brenda. Police officer Kenneth Diss, a friend of Brenda's family, heard the call and was extremely concerned about the alarming situation. He personally called Stephen to ask what was going on at their house, but Stephen could not provide any information because he was not home. After thinking for a moment, Stephen recalled that Sydney and Brenda were supposed to be at home discussing their study problems. He suspected there might have been a conflict between his wife and daughter. But he couldn't imagine the reality of the situation. Stephen then rushed home and called his daughter, Sydney, to find out what was going on. Sydney reassures him that everything is fine and the atmosphere seems calm. However, when Stephen tells her that the police are on their way, Sydney suddenly becomes hysterical. She begins to cry and reveals that a robber has broken into the house and attacked them. The call then ends abruptly. The police had already arrived at the house when Sydney dashed out, covered in blood, and screaming. She told the officers a shocking story about a robber who had broken in and attacked her mother. She said she heard glass breaking and that her mother told her to run, so she did. Sydney then hid in a courtyard, anxiously listening. She then found her mother lying in a pool of blood and she tried to help her, which is how she got blood on her. Inside the house, officers found Brenda lying face up in a room. She was badly injured, with a bloody cast iron skillet nearby and a kitchen knife on the floor. Despite the broken glass, officers began to doubt Sydney's story. Her story about a robber seemed very unbelievable. An ambulance arrived quickly and took Brenda to hospital, where she was taken to the intensive care unit. Sadly, 50-year-old Brenda Powell died shortly after arriving. Sydney was also examined by paramedics, but no serious injuries were found. She was sedated, her cuts were bandaged, and she was sent home. Forensic experts who examined Brenda's body were shocked by the brutality of the attack. She had suffered a severe blow to the back of the head, which caused her scalp to detach from her skull. Additionally, she had numerous stab wounds, estimated to be between 20 and 30, mostly concentrated on her neck. There were also multiple bruises and cuts on her arms, suggesting she had tried to defend herself. A preliminary review of the situation led police to believe that Sydney's account of events was fabricated. Although Sydney was covered in blood and had several smaller cuts on her arms, they were significantly less severe than her mother's injuries. It was evident that the robbery had been staged, as nothing was taken from the house. Sydney's actions raised several questions. After her mother told her to leave the house, why didn't she run to the neighbors for help or call 911? Instead, she waited in the yard and later went back into the house without any apparent fear. None of the neighbors reported seeing a robber. The blood found on Sydney was tested and matched her mother's, including traces on the broken glass. Police sent the knife, believed to be the murder weapon, and the frying pan for analysis. Brenda's blood was found on these items, and no fingerprints or other DNA were found at the scene. It appears that Sydney injured herself when she stabbed her mother. Sydney Powell was then taken to the police station for questioning. After the initial panic subsided, she refused to answer any questions. By this time, police investigating the attack had learned about recent events in Sydney's university life. They discovered that she had been expelled a month earlier and had lied to her family about her situation, staying with friends in hotels instead. She was so afraid of disappointing those around her that she had lied not only to her parents but also to her classmates and others. Police believe that Sydney was so afraid of telling the truth that she decided to kill her mother when her mother started to suspect something was wrong. Despite this, Sydney chose to remain silent. 19-year-old Sydney Powell was arrested and charged with murdering Brenda. She also faced charges for causing serious injury and for tampering with evidence to mislead the investigation. Due to her mental health issues, she was unable to admit or deny her guilt. Her lawyer argued that she was insane, stating that Sydney had struggled with serious mental health problems since childhood. At the time of the offense, Sydney may have been experiencing a mental health crisis that affected her perception of her actions. Sydney faced several mental health issues that may have contributed to the violent incident, which led police to request a psychiatric evaluation. During the examination, Sydney spoke about her memories of that day but could only recall bits and pieces. She remembered sitting in the basement, anxious about her parents coming home after her father found out about her struggles. She also remembers her mother coming home and their conversation starting, when her mother comforted her and asked what happened at school. She wished her mother would leave her alone. Then she heard the sound of glass breaking, and then she couldn't remember anything else about what happened. Sydney informed her doctor that she had been experiencing hallucinations since she was 11 years old. She had always been very anxious, responsible, and self-critical, setting extremely high academic standards for herself. At times her anxiety became so intense that it affected her ability to concentrate on tests, leading to multiple psychological evaluations. After extensive evaluation and discussion with Sydney, the psychiatrist diagnosed her with acute post-traumatic stress disorder, schizoaffective disorder, and depression. Sydney reported that she had recurring nightmares of her mother covered in blood. The lack of a clear motive for the murder led the psychiatrist to determine that Sydney was insane at the time of the incident. Another doctor who worked with Sydney for at least 3 to 6 months before the crime noted that her mental health had deteriorated significantly. She started losing touch with reality and began failing her exams, which ultimately led to her expulsion from university. Her condition was worsened by extreme self-criticism. She couldn't accept that she had failed. Sydney was also afraid to confess her struggles to her parents. However, the truth eventually came out, causing her immense stress. This culminated in a psychotic breakdown that resulted in her mother's murder. After her arrest, Sydney's bail was initially set at $250,000 but was later raised to $500,000. One of her relatives posted bail, allowing her to await her trial outside of custody. During this time, she received treatment for her mental health issues and felt significantly better by the time the hearings began. Sydney eventually regained her composure. After Sydney saw Brenda talking to college teachers, she knew that her mother would soon hear the truth from them. In a psychotic state, she attacked her mother. Teachers at the college heard the beginning of the attack. During the trial, her friends and relatives confirmed that they did not notice any significant changes in her behavior leading up to the crime. Although she was upset about being expelled, she was generally cheerful and sociable. The only noticeable difference was that she began sleeping more. The defense acknowledged that Sydney killed her mother but maintained that she was insane at the time. However, many experts disagreed with the psychiatrist's diagnosis. What everyone agreed on was that she suffered from borderline personality disorder, which is characterized by stubbornness, mood swings, and self-destructive behavior. In addition, signs of hallucinations were reported by Sydney to a psychiatrist when she was 11. There was no evidence in the medical records to support Sydney's claims, which undermined the defense's strategy. Several former friends mentioned that Sydney had exhibited unusual behavior even during her school years. One teacher recalled when Sydney was so nervous that she couldn't read anything on a test. However, teacher didn't realize that Sydney's anxiety could indicate mental health issues, so teacher didn't tell anyone. This type of anxiety continued into college, which may have contributed to Sydney failing her exams and eventually being expelled. While awaiting trial, Sydney lived with her grandmother and was prescribed medication to treat her mental health issues. The medication list and dosage were changed several times to find the most effective combination. Sydney's health improved significantly, and she shared any positive changes with her doctor. Her father also noticed the improvement and admitted that Sydney had a strong bond with her mother and loved her deeply. He believed that if Sydney had been in a healthy state of mind, she would never have harmed her mother. Throughout the trial, Sydney cried continuously and she expressed remorse for her actions. On September 18, 2023, the jury deliberated. Sydney Powell was found guilty on all counts. Sydney was sentenced to life in prison but will be eligible for parole after 15 years. Sydney and her attorney were unhappy with the sentence and planned to appeal the court's decision. Hello again, true crime fans, we've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Molly Tibbetts. Molly Tibbetts was a vibrant young woman born in San Francisco on May 8, 1998, to Rob and Laura Tibbetts. She had 2 brothers, Jake and Scott. Molly was fortunate to grow up with loving parents and began to excel in school shortly after starting 2nd grade. Life presented Molly with an unexpected challenge. Things were going well for her and her parents until they decided to divorce. In 2007, Molly moved to Brooklyn, Iowa, with her mother and brother. Brooklyn was her mother's hometown, and Molly now had the opportunity to experience her teenage years in this quiet town. The move was difficult for Scott, Jake, and Molly, but their caring parents provided essential support. Their father, Rob, maintained a close relationship with his children. Although he couldn't be there all the time, he was determined to do everything he could to help them. Brooklyn is a small town with a population of only 1,400. Life there is calm, a stark contrast to the hustle and bustle of San Francisco. Molly and her two brothers have adapted perfectly to their new home. Molly plans to continue her studies at Brooklyn College. She is a sociable person who makes many friends. Molly is smart, energetic, positive, and cheerful. In 2015, Molly met a senior named Dalton Jack at her Brooklyn school, and she instantly liked him. This encounter took place on a chilly October evening while Dalton and his friend were sitting in a pickup truck after playing football. A few younger students approached them, including Molly. Dalton was immediately taken with her. She made him laugh and he found her beautiful. They exchanged phone numbers and soon began having lunch together and going to the movies. From that point on, they fell in love and Dalton considering her his everything. Molly and Dalton's love for each other deepened over time. 2 years later, when Molly moved from Brooklyn to study psychology at the University of Iowa, she maintained her relationship with Dalton. While she was in Iowa, Dalton stayed in Brooklyn to pursue a career in construction, but this did not affect his feelings for her. They managed to see each other almost every weekend and even on some weekdays. Her freshman year at university passed quickly. By the end of May 2018, she returned to Brooklyn for the summer. During her break at home, Molly kept herself busy throughout the day. She worked at a local children's day camp at Green Regional Medical Center, and in the evenings, she participated in activities to prepare for her sophomore year. Molly also made time to go jogging almost every evening. She split her time between her mother's house and her boyfriend Dalton's house on the western edge of Brooklyn. Unlike university students, Dalton didn't have a summer vacation and worked most weekdays. His construction work is sometimes local and sometimes he works across the state. On July 18, 2018, Molly visited Dalton's house. Dalton lived there with his brother and their dogs. But both of them worked away from home. Dalton was working on a project on Highway 61 near Oak. Molly agreed to take care of the dogs and stay at Dalton's house to work and study. It was a hot day, so Molly stayed inside with her dogs and her laptop, hoping for a cooler temperature. The day seemed normal. She spent her free time chatting with her boyfriend on the phone, looking for something to eat, or engaging in conversations on Twitter. As the sun set, the weather cooled down. This is a good time for Molly to go for a run. Around 7:30 p.m., she left her laptop open, sent Dalton a selfie, put on her workout clothes, and headed to the cornfield for her workout. However, Molly never returned. She was missing that night. Dalton, who had not heard from her that night, assumed she was just busy and had gone to bed. But the next morning, when Molly's messages remained unanswered, he began to worry. He contacted friends to ask if they had heard from Molly, but they had no idea where she was. All of her social media accounts are inactive. The panic really began when her boss called Dalton to find out why she had missed work. Molly was always on time for her job and had never missed a day before, so her absence was unusual. Dalton was worried and wondered what could have happened to her. Her silence made Dalton, her family, and friends feel uneasy. By the end of the day, the police and the local community were mobilized to search for Molly. Missing posters were quickly plastered around the city and surrounding areas. Shortly after, Molly's father Rob flew from California to join the search efforts. In mid-July, Iowa was experiencing hot summer days, and the surrounding cornfields made visibility difficult. Police announced on television that the search for Molly is ongoing. While there are no new updates, the search continues. Molly, a 20-year-old University of Iowa student, went missing last Wednesday in Brooklyn. She was last seen by her neighbor jogging with her dogs, wearing shorts, a sports bra and sneakers. At the time, Molly's whereabouts were unknown. The only confirmed sighting was when a neighbor saw her running east of town that evening. Police had no further leads. As the weeks passed, the reward for information about Molly had increased significantly to nearly $400,000. They even created a website to encourage the public to share any information about Molly. Police also analyzed data from Molly's fitness tracker to determine her running route. Despite all the efforts, the investigation remained unsolved until mid-August. A person in northeast Brooklyn was reviewing surveillance footage when she noticed something unusual. Concerned, she reported her findings to the police, leading to a crucial discovery. The footage showed a 1951 Chevrolet with chrome side mirrors and handles. Initially, nothing unusual appeared, but the car returned and appeared on surveillance cameras multiple times. Then, at 8:07 p.m., the same Chevrolet was recorded again, this time speeding away. Based on the footage, the car, which was behaving erratically at the same time and place that Molly went missing, caught the attention of the police. They began searching for the car in the small town. They quickly located it. A day after reviewing the video of the black Chevrolet, deputy sheriffs spotted the vehicle on the road. Instead of stopping immediately, he followed the car until the driver stopped. The deputy sheriff approached the driver's window and identified him as John Bath. When asked about Molly's disappearance, John claimed he had no knowledge of her and was not involved. He was allowed to leave, but his freedom was short-lived. Just 2 days later, police officers visited John's workplace at a dairy farm and noticed he was now driving a different car, which belonged to his girlfriend. At this point, the police began to take notice of John, but they had no evidence that he was involved in Molly's disappearance. The police took John to the local police station for further questioning. Although John was not required to answer their questions, he chose to cooperate. The interrogation lasted several hours, and ultimately, John confessed. However, his real name was Christian Bahina Rivera, and he lived and worked in rural Polk County near Brooklyn. Originally from Mexico, he had entered the United States illegally at the age of 17. Because he could not work legally, he was not registered in any official system, including at his job on a farm near Brooklyn. During questioning, police asked Christian if he knew where Molly was, and he admitted that he had seen her the night she disappeared. He explained that he had noticed her before deciding to approach her. When he ran over to strike up a conversation, Molly did not respond. When he persisted, she took out her phone and warned him to leave or she would call the police. The next day, August 21st, after more than 10 hours of questioning, Christian agreed to lead the police to a remote area outside of Brooklyn. When the police arrived and got out of their car, they found Molly's body. She was lying under some corn stalks, wearing only a sports bra and socks. Christian confessed that when he confronted Molly and she threatened to call the police, he acted out of anger and ended up killing her, then hiding her body in a cornfield. Molly suffered between 7 and 12 stab wounds to the chest, ribs, neck, and skull, ultimately leading to her death. This tragic news has left Molly's family, friends, and acquaintances heartbroken. As they learned more about the circumstances of Molly's death, their grief turned to anger. On August 22nd, Christian was charged with first-degree murder. Concerns that he might flee led to his bail being raised from $1 million to $5 million. As the investigation into Molly's disappearance turns into a murder case, developments related to her case continue to surface both in public and in the media. The following month, Christian denied any involvement in the case, despite initially confessing to Molly's murder. He later recanted his confession. Police made significant progress in the case. They searched Christian's black Chevrolet and discovered blood in both the trunk and on the rims. Testing revealed that the blood belonged to Molly, indicating that she had been in Christian's trunk that night. A series of bureaucratic delays postponed the court case. The public trial of Christian was delayed for several months and moved to another county for safety reasons. In August 2019, Christian's defense team submitted a 20-page motion arguing that his confession should not be used as evidence. They claimed he was not properly informed of his Miranda rights because of his foreign nationality. This means that although he admitted to killing Molly, he did not receive a warning that anything he said could be used against him in court. Therefore, his confession could not be used as evidence. In addition, the judge postponed Christian's trial until 2020 to allow more time to review the case. In 2020, the trial was postponed again. On May 17, 2021, Christian Bahena Rivera's trial finally began. His defense team argued that the police had violated his rights before charging him with murder. They claimed that the police had used illegal interrogation methods to force Christian to confess. When this approach failed, the defense attempted to blame Molly's boyfriend, Dalton, claiming that he had cheated on her 3 years earlier and then killed her. However, Dalton had a solid alibi for the time of Molly's disappearance. Although he was absent from work for nearly 2 hours, several co-workers were able to confirm his whereabouts during that time, and it was clear that he loved Molly very much. Christian eventually testified, but he changed his story. He claimed that 2 armed men came to his house, forced him to drive them until they found Molly, then killed her and forced him to drive to a cornfield, threatening his son's life if he revealed what had happened. Christian's confession, the surveillance footage, Molly's blood found in the trunk of his car, and his own incredible story all pointed clearly to his guilt. On Friday, May 28, Christian Bahena Rivera was convicted of murdering Molly Tibbetts. After just 7 hours of jury deliberation, Christian was found guilty of first-degree murder. He was sentenced to life in prison. After the verdict, Christian's girlfriend, who had been raising their son Will, disappeared from Brooklyn, leaving his son on the farm without a family. With nowhere else to go, Will was eventually adopted by Molly's mother, Laura. This adoption allowed Will to continue his education and move toward a brighter future. Her parents consistently chose love over hate, which helps explain Molly's positive character. The support didn't end there. Hundreds of people came together at the University of Iowa to celebrate Molly's memory. Hello, crime enthusiasts, are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Tasha Morton. Dwayne Barrentine was a single father raising his 6-year-old son. Nothing is known about the child's mother. In June 2007, Dwayne and his son lived in the suburbs of Marianna, a small, sunny town in Florida, USA. Although Dwayne worked full-time to provide for his son, he made sure to spend as much time as possible with him on weekends. His parents helped care for the boy, and he also took his son to kindergarten, but the child missed having a mother's care, which concerned Dwayne. He often heard his son pray before bed, wishing for a mother. Dwayne decides to search for a suitable woman who can become his wife and a loving mother to his son. When Dwayne was picking up his son from kindergarten one day, a new teacher handed him a note with her phone number. Curiously, he asked whose number it was, and the woman said it was hers. Dwayne realized she was flirting with him. Attracted by the beautiful blonde, he took the chance and called her. During the conversation, they discovered that they had a lot in common. Tasha was also a single mother, newly moved to the city with her 6-year-old daughter, Lexi. At the time, Tasha was 31 years old and worked as a kindergarten teacher. When Dwayne and Tasha started dating, Tasha's daughter and Dwayne's son were the same age and quickly became friends. Lexi even called Dwayne dad, which he was touched by. Tasha's daughter was a child from her previous marriage, a subject she did not want to discuss. Her private nature did not affect the couple in the early stages of their relationship. Within weeks, Lexi started calling Dwayne daddy, and he really loved Lexi. Soon after, they moved in together, in Dwayne's house. He was delighted with his new partner. She was a beautiful and charming woman who showed her love through small, thoughtful gestures. It seemed like they had found each other and had a happy future ahead of them. Dwayne told his old friends and relatives that he loved her very much. To him, Tasha seemed perfect. However, not everyone was happy with their relationship. Dwayne's mother criticized him for rushing into a relationship and moving in together so quickly. She thought they should get to know each other better. But Dwayne ignored his mother's advice. Tasha says she doesn't want to discuss her past because of past hurts. Dwayne chose not to press her for more details to avoid upsetting her. Over time, as more stories about Tasha's past came to light, Dwayne noticed more and more inconsistencies. Some of the stories seemed particularly strange. Tasha claimed that her grandfather was a federal judge who died in a battery explosion and that she was supposed to inherit a large sum of money. However, there was no inheritance, and attempts to verify her stories were unsuccessful, even though such a significant event should have been easy to confirm. As they continued to live together, Dwayne noticed that Tasha often made up stories about her living. This worried him, so he decided to investigate further to learn more about her past. While searching the internet, he discovers that Tasha's first husband was a man named Mitch Kemp, but he was not her only husband. Dwayne uncovered that by age 31, she had been married 5 times, which Dwayne found unusual. And Mitch is Lexi's father. After much persuasion, Tasha finally confides in Dwayne, admitting that her marriage to Mitch was a mistake. She sees him as a friend and has no romantic feelings for him. Despite Dwayne's efforts, he is unable to find Mitch Kemp to gather more information about Tasha. Mitch seems to have disappeared. Tasha mentions that she has not heard from Mitch in years and has not attempted to contact him, which Dwayne finds strange. Dwayne eventually contacted Jones, one of Tasha's ex-husbands. He agreed to meet and talk. Dwayne shared that Tasha was hesitant to share her past with him, so she often made up stories about her life. Jones then revealed something to Dwayne that shocked him. Jones said that Tasha, while drunk, confessed that she was involved in the murder of one of her ex-husbands. According to Jones, Tasha had had a few drinks that night, which made her more talkative. According to Tasha, Mitch raped her daughter. She could not forgive him for this act. At the time, Tasha was married to another man named Greg Morton. She told him about the incident and Greg became extremely angry. Instead of reporting Mitch to the police, they decided to take matters into their own hands. Together, they planned to kill Mitch. Tasha lures Mitch to her new home and Greg waits for Mitch there, shooting him multiple times in the heart. Jones did not believe his wife's story because it seemed like she was making it up. Because she told it while she was drunk, which is why he did not go to the police. However, Dwayne became suspicious because he could not find any contact information for Mitch, Lexi's biological father, whom she had married before Greg. He suspected that Mitch might be dead. This caused Dwayne to reconsider the facts he had heard and began searching for information. However, he could not find any evidence linking Tasha to the murder. So he continued living with Tasha. Despite his concerns, he decided to ignore the situation to ensure his son had a loving mother. She was very loving and caring towards him, which made him doubt Jones' story, so he stopped looking for more information. The couple planned their wedding. After a few months, Dwayne discovered that Tasha was cheating on him. They had an argument, and he kicked her out of the house. Feeling hurt, Dwayne decided to continue his investigation into her past. He went to her MySpace page, where he found a number of unread messages. People were asking if the account belonged to Mitch's ex-wife and wanted to know where she was. According to Mitch's relatives, Mitch had been missing for about 4 years and they had been looking for him the entire time. These messages worried Dwayne, piqued his interest in the story, and motivated him to continue his investigation. Dwayne reviewed all the information he had gathered. He noticed that Lexi's birth certificate bore the last name Kemp. Tasha had married Mitch shortly before she married Greg. One of Tasha's other ex-husbands, Jones, revealed that Tasha and Greg were involved in a conspiracy and that Mitch's murder was a disturbing fact. However, Dwayne could not take any further action as the clues to uncover the truth had run out. Dwayne went to the Marion Police Department and told the sheriff his story. The police officers listened carefully and were interested in the part involving Mitch Kemp. They started an investigation and asked Dwayne to keep it secret to avoid alarming Tasha. The police believed they were dealing with a murder case and even had suspects. This situation was unprecedented for the town's police, as it was the first time a civilian had independently used social networks to uncover clues to solve an old crime. The police were particularly impressed by Dwayne's accuracy in determining the dates and times of events. He showed a natural talent for investigation. However, the police still have to continue investigating on their own, using every clue to investigate the case. Police initially spoke with Jones, who told Dwayne the same story about Tasha's plot. The conversation was recorded. Police also contacted Mitch Kemp's relatives, who live thousands of miles away in Boone County, Missouri. From his relatives, police were able to glean important information about the circumstances and timing of Mitch's disappearance. Mitch's family has always suspected Tasha of being involved in his disappearance. At this point, Tasha was 26 years old, and Mitch was almost 11 years her senior. Some people began to doubt her sincerity because she was much younger and very attractive. At first, their relationship seemed perfect, but soon Tasha became controlling and ignored his wishes and those of his family. Mitch, normally gentle and kind, put up with her behavior and became an easy target for manipulation. Despite this, their relationship continued. In 2002, the couple had a daughter and later got married. Unfortunately, their marriage was not long-lasting or happy. They faced financial problems and their relationship was very complicated. This unstable situation could not last. After 8 months, the marriage ended. Tasha left with her daughter. Not wanting to be a single mother, she met Greg Morton before her divorce was finalized. They started dating and she moved in with him along. They were married just 6 months after meeting. Mitch Kemp was very upset because he still loved Tasha and wanted to reconcile with her. However, Tasha refused to return to him, prompting Mitch to pursue joint custody of their daughter by filing a lawsuit. When he informed Tasha, she became very angry, especially after Mitch threatened to seek full custody. In August 2004, Mitch shared this conversation with his brother, also revealing that during their last meeting, Tasha had hit and spat at him. Just 2 weeks later, Mitch vanished without a trace. His brother tried to reach out to Tasha, suspecting she might know Mitch's whereabouts given their serious conflict over divorce and custody. Tasha denied any knowledge of Mitch's location and subsequently ignored all communication from his family. Meanwhile, she continued to pay her bills using funds from Mitch's bank account. Mitch's family was unable to find him, so they contacted the Boone County Sheriff's Department. Unfortunately, the search was unsuccessful and Mitch disappeared without a trace. The investigation reached a dead end and the case was archived without any active involvement. The police found no evidence or confirmation that Tasha and Greg were involved in Mitch's disappearance or murder. About 4 years later, in 2008, the police finally got Dwayne's story. The police believed Mitch was no longer alive. But they had no body, no murder weapon, and no crime scene. Ideally, they need a confession and the police need to talk to Tasha. So the police began looking for Tasha. When the police found her, they invited her to the station for questioning. When she arrived at the police station, Tasha expressed her desire to cooperate with the police. She was unaware that the police already knew about the murder story she had told Jones. She said she was not surprised by Mitch's disappearance, given his bad character, and suggested that someone might have sought revenge against him. When asked about her second husband, she mentioned that she had divorced Greg a long time ago and had little contact with him, knowing nothing about his current situation. Tasha also denied any involvement in Mitch's disappearance. However, the police believed they were on the right track and continued to pressure her to confess. Tasha initially described Greg as a normal, unremarkable person. However, as the police asked more questions, a darker side to Greg's personality emerged. He seemed intimidating, as Tasha began to describe him as aggressive and short-tempered. The police eventually convinced Tasha to confess that Greg had killed Mitch. According to her narrative, one day when she was not home, Mitch came over to discuss custody of their daughter. A heated argument broke out between Mitch and Greg, which escalated into a fight. During the fight, Greg pulled out a gun and shot Mitch several times in the chest. This incident occurred in August 2004. Tasha believes that there may have been hostility between Greg and Mitch, as Greg was extremely jealous and suspected her of having an affair with Mitch. Tasha had anticipated this possibility but hoped it would not come to pass. Fortunately, her daughter was not home at the time of the murder. She assured the police that she was not involved, did not encourage Greg to commit the murder, and did not turn him against Mitch, her ex-husband. She claimed that she only learned about the incident when Greg confessed to her, detailing how he shot Mitch. Tasha also provided information about where to find Mitch's body. Mitch's body was believed to be at the old farm, although she did not know the exact location. The farm was a large area, about 15 hectares, and had been sold after the murder. The old house had been demolished, and a new house had been built elsewhere, making it impossible to recreate the crime scene, which greatly hindered the search for the body. Despite Tasha's claims of innocence, the police began to suspect her, especially because of Jones's account of her presence at the crime scene and she had lured Mitch to meet the killer. This story warranted a thorough investigation, but could not proceed without the body being found. Tasha cooperated fully with the police. She agreed to travel with them from Florida to Missouri to search for Mitch's body on a farm. When she arrived, she was confused because the area had changed dramatically. Everything had been rebuilt and a new family was living there. As they walked around, Tasha focused on the location of the old house. Even though the buildings were destroyed, she confidently pointed out the location. However, the police found nothing there with their equipment, leading them to suspect that she might be lying. The police believed that Tasha should have known exactly where Mitch's body was. The search for the body on the farm continued. Despite the efforts of the searchers, they were still unable to find anything. After 5 weeks of painstaking and fruitless work, Tasha was questioned again, with the police applying even more pressure. This was to be expected, as they had excavated a large area without finding a single clue. At that moment, Tasha suddenly remembered a large hole being dug on the farm. Greg had buried the body there shortly after he told her about the murder. Tasha was able to point out the location on a map. The police focused their efforts on this spot, and within half an hour of digging, the police found human remains wrapped in a tarp. The body was quickly taken for forensic analysis, which confirmed that the remains belonged to Mitch Kemp, who had been reported missing. Forensic experts determined that he was murdered, finding 6 bullets in his chest that caused instant death. Mitch was shot at point-blank range, leaving him with no chance of survival. 3 weeks after his body was discovered, police arrested Greg Morton in St. Louis and charged him with first-degree murder. Police hoped he would denounce his ex-wife, Tasha, whom they suspected was also involved in the crime. However, Greg remained silent. Police believed that keeping him in custody would persuade him to talk, but this strategy failed. Even after spending months in jail, Greg still did not testify against Tasha. Despite this, police chose to arrest Tasha out of concern she might flee. Although the investigation lacked solid evidence, relying only on a witness statement, she was charged with first-degree murder. Tasha was arrested in the city. She later gave a different account of Mitch's death. She explained that she had indeed taken Mitch to the farm but claimed that she had no intention of leading him into a trap, as she did not know. Tasha intended to give Mitch pictures of their daughter at kindergarten and wanted to talk to him. However, Greg found out about them together. He approached with a gun and pointed it at Mitch. Before she could react, Greg shot Mitch 6 times in the chest. She believed Greg acted out of jealousy. After the shooting stopped, Greg pinned her against the wall, blaming her for provoking him and causing Mitch's death. She wanted to call the police, but it was too late to help Mitch. Greg forced her to be quiet and then disposed of the body by burying it in a large hole. Surprisingly, after these violent events, Tasha and Greg lived together for about 1.5 years before they divorced. The police were baffled. How could she continue living with the man who killed the father of her child? However, Tasha explained that she feared ending the relationship would put her in danger. 3 weeks after Tasha was arrested, Greg finally spoke up and shared his account of the tragic events with the police. Greg admitted to shooting Mitch but claimed he was manipulated by his ex-wife. He said Tasha had told him about the rape and was seeking revenge. Greg insists that if it weren't for her urging, he wouldn't have hurt Mitch. Despite Greg's claims, Tasha maintained her innocence. In June 2010, nearly 6 years after Mitch's disappearance, Tasha Morton went to trial. Tasha's lawyers argued that she was a victim, trapped in an abusive relationship with violent Greg, who they said killed Mitch and threatened her into silence. Greg's defense argued that Tasha was responsible for the murder. They claimed that she had convinced Greg, her devoted second husband, to kill Mitch, with whom she was fighting for custody of their child. Tasha maintained to the end that she had nothing to do with the crime. However, the prosecution was certain that her manipulations caused the tragic event. The main evidence was the confession of Greg, the killer, who had accepted a plea deal in exchange for a reduced sentence for second-degree murder. The court ultimately sentenced Greg Morton to 19 years in prison. Tasha's defense claimed that Greg had fabricated the story to get a reduced sentence. They argued that Greg had acted out of jealousy, leading him to shoot the innocent victim, Mitch. During the trial, a neighbor who lived near the couple at the time of the incident testified. He described Greg as domineering, asserting complete control over his wife and demanding that she follow his orders without question. It was clear that Tasha feared Greg and was unable to manipulate him. Then, Tasha's ex-husband, Jones, became a key witness. He recounted a story that Tasha had shared while drunk during their marriage, claiming that she had invited Mitch to the farm with the intention of killing him. However, Tasha denied that this conversation ever happened, claiming that Jones learned the story from Greg, not her. She believes Jones is protecting Greg. Besides listening to the testimony, the jury had to watch over 8 hours of interrogation footage. Tasha's lawyer believed she would be acquitted. The jury recognized that she had cooperated with the investigation from the start, helped in the search, and without her, Mitch's body might never have been found. Her defense argued that if Tasha were involved in her ex-husband's death, she wouldn't have led police to this clue. However, Tasha may have had a motive, as Mitch was fighting for custody of their child. Tasha claimed that Mitch saw Lexi regularly, and they never fought over custody. After 8 hours of deliberations, the jury returned to the courtroom and found Tasha Morton guilty of first-degree murder. The jury explained their decision by noting that Tasha's story had changed several times, while Greg's story remained consistent. They concluded that Tasha had lied and manipulated Greg into killing Mitch. The verdict came as a complete shock to Tasha. She was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Tasha attempted to appeal her sentence, but her efforts were unsuccessful. Mitch's family celebrated the verdict, feeling that justice had finally been served. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Emma Jangestig. Arboga, a small town in Sweden about 160 kilometers west of Stockholm, experienced a crime in 2008 that remains one of the most shocking in the country. On March 17, 2008, a 20-year-old mother of two, Emma Jangestig, was spending the evening with her children. Her eldest, Max, was 3 years old, and her youngest, Saga, was 1.5. Emma was preparing dinner while waiting for her fiancé, Torg Hellberg, who was still at work and expected to return in a few hours. Emma had been divorced for a year when she met Torg. They quickly developed a relationship and moved in together. The couple bought a house. This move took place just 2 months before the tragedy. Although Torg was not the biological father of Emma's children, he cared for them as if they were his own. It seemed that Emma had found the perfect partner to build a complete family and raise her children. Nicholas, the biological father of Max and Saga, maintained contact with the kids. He had a reserved relationship with his ex-wife, Emma, but spoke with the children almost every day. Around 6 p.m., Emma and the children sat down for dinner. Torg couldn't join them this time because he was working late, but he said he would be home soon. While waiting, Emma decided to use the time to message her family and friends. She used a messaging app to chat with her sister, and their conversation continued smoothly until her sister received the last message at 19:07. Suddenly, their dialogue stopped abruptly in the middle of a sentence. Emma didn't read more messages or respond, which seemed odd. Her sister found this strange, so she contacted Torg and expressed her concern about Emma's unusual behavior and lack of response. As it turned out, Torg was free earlier than expected and was already walking home. He assured Emma's sister that he would check on the situation. Torg arrived at the house at 19:17. Everything seemed normal from the outside. But he noticed the front door was open, which was unusual since it was usually locked. Sensing something was wrong, Torg cautiously entered the house and was met with a shocking sight. The corridor was in complete disarray, items were scattered on the floor, and some pieces of furniture were broken. Initially, he couldn't understand what had happened and thought it might be a children's game that had gotten out of hand. However, he soon realized that the extent of the chaos was too severe for children to have caused it, and Emma would not have allowed it. He called out to all the household members by name several times, but there was no response. Suddenly, at the end of the hallway, Torg noticed a suspicious figure on the floor. As he approached, he was horrified. He saw a small body lying in an unusual position with many cuts on its face and head. Emma lay next to it, her body covered in blood. Realizing he needed to act quickly, Torg called the police at 7:20 p.m. The police received the call from Torg, a distressed man who was desperately calling for help. He explained that someone had attacked his family while he was away. In the background, a woman's moans could be heard. The police quickly dispatched police and ambulance services to the location. Doctors arrived within minutes. By then, Torg had discovered that all 3 family members had suffered severe head injuries, so severe that they were unrecognizable. To their surprise, doctors discovered that all of the victims were still alive and breathing. Everyone was immediately taken to the hospital for emergency care. Max and Saga were in critical condition, while Emma's injuries were slightly less severe. Her was placed in intensive care and put into a medically induced coma. Doctors predicted from the start that even if the children and mother survived, the brain injuries they suffered would likely have long-term effects on their lives. Doctors battled to save the victims. Meanwhile, forensic experts examined the scene of the horrific attack, which looked like a scene from a horror movie. The area was cordoned off for a thorough examination due to the severe chaos inside the house. Unfortunately, the medical team left many traces while providing aid and transporting the victims, which led to displaced objects and lost evidence. The attack clearly happened within a 13-minute window between 1907, when Emma's sister received her last message, and Tord's emergency call at 1920. Initially, Tord, the head of the family, was suspected. However, he had a solid alibi as surveillance cameras had captured him on his way home, thus eliminating him from the suspect list. With the time intervals clarified, it became clear that he was telling the truth. This indicated that the attacker had only a 10-minute window between 1907 and 1917, when Torg entered the house and found the wounded family members. Although Torg was no longer a suspect, the police decided to speak with him again at the station. They assumed he might have seen or heard something important for the investigation. However, he insisted that he did not see any strangers or cars. The only thing that seemed suspicious to him was the unlocked door of the house. Police then suspected Emma's ex-husband Nicholas as a potential suspect. Torg explained that Nicholas had constant conflicts with Emma over communication about the children, division of assets and alimony. These issues escalated at times, and she even went to the police because she feared for her safety. However, this was long before the tragedy. Eventually, they reached an agreement and everything was resolved. The police are working hard at the crime scene to gather more information. The perpetrator could be someone close to Emma. Looking at the level of attacks on the victims, it seems that there was a personal motive. Whoever this person was, they harbored a deep hatred for the victims, lost control during the killing process, and caused many injuries. At the time, Emma's ex-husband Nicholas was the prime suspect. Due to previous conflicts with Emma, he even threatened her, prompting her to contact the police. He was later arrested and questioned. Nicholas was shocked by the incident but calmly answered police questions. He had an alibi for the time of the attack, as he was in another city. Although the alibi has not been verified, his behavior suggests that he is not the killer. The police's only hope is 3-year-old Saga, who is still fighting for her life in hospital. If she survives, she could be the police's only witness, providing vital information about who the killer is. The victim's family fear the attacker may return to harm Saga again. To protect her, 24-hour security has been deployed to the hospital. She is in critical condition and doctors believe that even if she survives, she may be permanently disabled and might not remember the attack. No other witnesses to the attack could be found. The neighbors neither saw nor heard anything, so the police started reviewing the surveillance cameras in the area. They hoped to track the attacker and determine his origin. It was also crucial to find the murder weapon, which might have traces of the criminal. Therefore, patrol officers carefully examined the area and even used search dogs, but unfortunately, this yielded no results. Forensic experts found that the children had been attacked with a heavy object, such as a hammer or similar tool. The children had been hit with such force that their skulls had been fractured. Each child had been hit multiple times, indicating the intensity of the attacker's rage. This behavior was an important clue. However, it is not possible to identify anyone capable of doing so. The young family had no connections to the criminal world and no enemies. They were known to be good people. The police quickly confirmed their suspicions of a personal motive, as nothing was stolen from the crime scene. Valuables and money were still present, indicating it wasn't a robbery. The forensic examination of the house concluded the day after the murder. By then, Nicholas was removed from the list of suspects because his alibi was verified. And he was released. Emma is still in a coma and the investigation is making no progress. The case attracted considerable media attention. The area had a low crime rate, and the choice of victims and the level of cruelty were shocking. Police contacted local people through the media, which aroused the interest of those living near Emma's house. A passerby reported seeing a man dressed in black with a hood standing hesitantly in the doorway of the house at around 7 p.m. About 5 to 10 minutes later, the same witness, returning from the shop, saw a suspiciously frail man dressed in black run out of the house, get into a car and drive away immediately. He did not get a good look at the person and could not describe the car, but he thought the driver might be a woman disguised as a man. Several other witnesses later gave similar descriptions of a man in the area. It was clear that the man dressed in black was the suspect before the attack. A man then went to the police and reported his ex-girlfriend, expressing concern about her recent inappropriate behavior. She was identified as Christina Schurrer, 31, born in Hanover, Germany. When she was 11, her father left the family and they had limited contact after that. Christina then moved to New York and lived with relatives in Manhattan. After returning to Germany, Christina settled in Göttingen, where for the next 6 years she studied history. She then went to Greece and participated in RASP. While in Athens, she worked at a hotel and as a historian. Later, she moved to Crete and worked in another hotel. In August 2006, Torg, a 20-year-old trader, vacationed on Crete and stayed at Christina's hotel. On his first day there, he met Christina, and they began a romance. They spent 5 days together on his vacation and continued to correspond after he left. Christina later visited him in Sweden, where they spent several days together. After her visit, she suggested going skiing, but he was not interested. Torg admitted that during this time, he noticed that Christina seemed very different than when she was on vacation, and he felt suspicious about their relationship. In January, he told Christina that their relationship was over, but she couldn't accept it calmly and tried everything to fix it. She kept messaging him, urging him to reconsider and get back together. In March 2007, she visited Sweden for 2 weeks and convinced Torg to have dinner with her. He agreed, but during the meeting, he made it clear that they could only be friends. Christina accepted this and left, but after some time, she returned to Sweden again, insisting on a new meeting, considering that this should be the last dinner together at which they would clear things up. During this meeting, she suggested giving their relationship another chance, but Torg firmly refused, as he believed the matter was settled. The Christina informed the Torg that, since they would no longer be in a relationship, she wanted to visit him to collect some items she forgot during a previous visit. Torg agreed to her request. After a brief visit, Christina left. However, the next day, she called again asking for help because she got lost near a castle. The Torg went to find her, and when he did, she admitted that she had taken a large dose of drugs the previous night, intending to end her life due to their breakup. Feeling compassionate, Torg allowed her to stay the night. He contacted her family in Germany to express concern over Christina's situation, informing them about her mental health issues and suggesting they admit her to a psychiatric hospital. Torg was confident that she needed help and hoped treatment would resolve her obsessive behavior. Additionally, he felt she would be far enough away not to disturb him anymore. Her family arranged for her to stay in a psychiatric clinic for 3 weeks. Unfortunately, even this did not stop her. In the summer of 2007, she moved to Stockholm with the intention of staying long-term. Christina rented a house and began looking for work. It was later discovered that in January 2008, she went to Germany but returned on February 20th. After her return, she wrote to Torg, saying that she had given birth to his son. Christina also revealed that she had given the child up for adoption due to her mental health problems. This caused confusion for Torg, as he did not know about her pregnancy. Christina mentioned that she had just gone on a business trip to Germany and that their child might have a genetic blood disease. She said that if the doctor's answer was confirmed, the adoptive parents would contact Torg to discuss the matter. Torg was confused by this. At the time, he was in a serious relationship with Emma and they lived together with her children. In January 2008, they moved into a new house. Emma knew about Christina's problems and the story of her son. Emma was skeptical and asked in question, which hospital was the child born in? She wanted to verify this information to avoid any problems, but Christina could not answer. It seemed that she was lying. After some time, Torg received a call from a stranger claiming to be the adoptive father of Christina's son. He confirmed what Christina had said and confirmed that Torg was the biological father of the child. The entire situation seemed unbelievable. It appeared that someone Christina knew had contacted Torg at her request, trying to manipulate the situation. At this point, Torg and Emma both believed the story of the child to be a fabrication. Christina could not provide any evidence of her son's existence. Police began investigating the possibility that Christina had been involved in the murder of Emma and her two children. She had been near Emma's home on the day of the murder before quickly leaving for Germany. To solve these problems, cooperation between the Swedish and German police was needed. On March 20th, a warrant was issued for Christina's arrest. The media quickly reported that Christina had been found in Hanover. Upon hearing the news, her mother and brother contacted the police, asking why Christina was a suspect. The police explained their suspicions of her involvement in a violent attack, which shocked her mother. Christina then called the police herself, claiming it was a misunderstanding and denying any involvement. However, she was arrested after speaking with the police. Christina requested an attorney, and her attorney found an error in the arrest warrant, which led to her release. However, Christina was rearrested 24 hours later. Throughout her interrogation, Christina maintained her innocence. When police searched her rented apartment, they confiscated her cell phone, laptop, and the clothing she was believed to have been wearing on the day of the murder. Christina claimed she was wearing a beige jacket, but witnesses said they saw her wearing a black jacket. The black jacket found during the search was clean and bloodless, suggesting it may have been a different item of clothing. The key evidence was found in search queries on Christina's laptop, which had many photos of Emma and her children and a blueprint of their home. This showed that Christina was planning the crime. Just before the attack, she looked up ways to hide evidence of a crime. She also repeatedly checked Torg's social media pages, demonstrating her intense obsession with him, along with diary entries detailing her victims, including their addresses and habits. On March 27th, Emma emerged from her coma. She was recognizable, much to the relief of her family. Police prepared for a crucial interview when Emma was able to communicate clearly, taking care not to mention her children to protect her mental state and ensure accurate responses. On April 1st, just 3 days after waking from her coma, Emma had her first meeting with the police. Despite her efforts to remember, she did not understand the police's questions or why she was in the hospital. Doctors hoped that her memory would improve over time. Emma asked more and more about her children. After her first interview, a doctor briefed her about the attack but did not go into detail. However, by the next morning, Emma had forgotten the conversation, a situation that lasted for weeks. Because of her fragile condition, officials chose to provide only vague answers about her children and prevented her from accessing newspapers or TV. This restriction frustrated her further, as she couldn't understand the situation. She continued to believe her children were alive, despite her initial memory lapses. Finally, after a conversation with a doctor, she realized that she would never see her children again, but she still could not remember what had happened. She believed that she had been in a serious accident. At this time, forensic experts did not find any of Christina's DNA or fingerprints in Emma's house. It is possible that Christina's attempt to stage the murder was successful. Additionally, they were unable to find a murder weapon. In March, Christina's roommate reported to the police that a hammer had gone missing from her toolbox. The hammer matched the description of the murder weapon, indirectly linking Christina to the crime. However, without strong evidence to charge, the investigation continued. Police focused on shoe prints found at the scene of the children's murders. Several other footprints, belonging to the paramedics, the 3 victims, and Torg, were not involved and were discarded. However, police did identify prints from sneakers not worn by family members or police. They identified the brand, style, and size that Christina had worn. A photo on her personal page showed her wearing the same pair of sneakers, in the same size, but this evidence remained circumstantial. Video surveillance recordings from the railway station provided significant evidence, showing that Christina, wearing her jacket, visited the city at least 3 times in the week before the attack. Her last visit was on the day of the murder, March 17th. Although the images were unclear, her identity was confirmed through mobile phone geolocation. When questioned, Christina could not clearly explain her presence in the city. She later stated that she was there for work. Police were able to determine the motive for the attack when they found notes on Christina's computer that revealed her intense jealousy of Emma, as Christina struggled to accept that Torg had found happiness with someone else. A psychological examination determined that Christina was sane. The police continued to make every effort to help the Emma, who miraculously survived, regain her memory. They even accompanied her to the crime scene, but this did not assist. Then, a few days later, there was an unexpected breakthrough. Emma suddenly recalled that on the evening of March 17th, someone had knocked on the door. The Emma opened it to find a girl in dark clothes and a hood standing there. The stranger introduced herself as Christina and immediately struck Emma on the head with a heavy object. It is frightening to think about what happened next in the house and what the defenseless children went through. On July 29, 2008, Christina Scherer appeared in court in Sweden, charged with double murder and attempted murder. Her defense team remained hopeful, considering the evidence against her circumstantial and easily dismissed. However, Christina's strange behavior complicated matters. She waved and smiled inappropriately at those present in court, behavior that supported the prosecutor's portrayal of her as cruel. Christina said her visit to the city was for work. The prosecution, on the other hand, argued that she had come to the city with the intention of killing. They claimed that she had been there twice before, on March 12th and 14th, to check out her targets. Furthermore, they portrayed Christina as a pathological liar obsessed with her ex-partner. There was no evidence that she had ever been pregnant or had children. No witnesses saw her pregnant, and there were no maternity records showing that she had given birth or adopted a child. This undermined her claim of having children, casting doubt on her credibility. The key witness for the prosecution was Emma, who identified Christina on the first day of the hearing. She recalled that about 10 minutes before returning from work, she opened the door and encountered the person who had killed her children. Emma was so shocked to see the killer that she fainted in the courtroom. This incident was significant because it confirmed that Emma had not been exposed to any information about the suspect or the crime prior to that moment, which strengthened the prosecution's case. The defense focused on the fact that all the evidence against Christina was circumstantial. They pointed out that the murder weapon didn't have her fingerprints, and there was no DNA evidence linking her to the crime. The prosecutors highlighted blurry surveillance footage and a sneaker print, suggesting that doctors may have inadvertently destroyed important evidence. Additionally, one witness recalled seeing Christina near the crime scene, which supported her presence close to Emma's house, where another witness identified the attacker. Christina could not explain her internet searches in relation to the evidence cover-up, nor why she had photos of Emma and the children, along with a diagram of Emma's house. On August 26, the jury found Christina Schurer guilty of double murder and attempted murder. She was sentenced to life in prison without parole. In addition, the court ordered her to pay Emma 100,000 crowns, or about $10,000. Christina's attorney immediately appealed the decision, but the appeal was denied. It is expected that if Christina is ever released from prison, she will be deported to Germany and permanently barred from returning to Sweden. In 2012, she was transferred to a women's prison in Fay, Germany, at her request. She continues to seek to overturn the court's decision and insists on her innocence, attempting to obtain a new trial. Emma is still dealing with the physical and mental effects of her injuries. Throughout this time, Torg has been a strong support, and they eventually married. They later had 2 children together. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Taylor Wright. Taylor Wright was born on April 23, 1988. Friends and family described her as energetic and full of life. She was kind and empathetic, spending most of her life in North Carolina as she pursued her American dream. Taylor married Jeff Wright and later had a son named Drake. She earned a college degree and worked as an officer at the local police station, where she solved numerous crimes and was respected. To the outside world, Taylor's life seemed perfect. She had a loving husband, a son, and a respected job. However, the reality was that not everything in her life was as idyllic as it appeared. Taylor's close friends knew that she smoked marijuana occasionally, but she kept it a secret. During her time in the police force, she used it to manage stress and her heavy workload. She claimed that she didn't smoke regularly, only occasionally to relax after a long day. However, Jeff found out about her secret and left with her son after their divorce. This made Taylor realize that she needed to change her life. In 2016, Taylor decided to start over and moved to Pensacola, Florida, a small resort town with a population of about 52,000. She likes the warm, comfortable atmosphere here. After quitting her job, she began working as a private investigator. Armed with the knowledge and experience from her previous job, she was eager to apply her skills to help her clients. Taylor divorced her husband, but faced 2 major challenges: child custody and financial issues. Court proceedings to divide assets and child custody were ongoing. It was a complicated divorce, and despite her efforts to reach an agreement, they were unable to reach an agreement, which dragged on. In September 2017, frustrated by financial disputes, Taylor withdrew money from her bank account without telling Jeff. The money, which was her personal savings, was something she did not want to share with Jeff. After withdrawing the money, she gave it to a friend to keep. One of Taylor's friends, Ashley MacArthur, is the main character in this story. Taylor has known Ashley, a forensic scientist, for over a year. Although it was a relatively short period of time, they became very close, to the point where Taylor entrusted Ashley with a large sum of money. Ashley agreed to help and was supposed to deposit the money in a safe deposit box, keeping it a secret from Jeff until Taylor was ready to use it. However, she soon needed money to pay for a lawyer. When Taylor reached out to Ashley, she noticed that Ashley always had excuses for delaying the return of the money or only giving her small amounts. Ashley claimed she was having trouble withdrawing the funds or that there were issues with the bank. During this time, Taylor grew increasingly suspicious that something was wrong and worried that her money might have been spent. Despite Taylor's persistent requests for the full amount to be returned, Ashley continued to provide various excuses. On the evening of September 7, 2017, Taylor and her friend Cassandra Waller went out to dinner. Cassandra had quickly become close friends after Taylor moved to the area. Cassandra was new to the city and Taylor suggested they rent an apartment together. Cassandra, a kind teacher, agreed. Over time, they developed a strong friendship. During dinner, Taylor shared her financial concerns, especially about her friend Ashley, who she believed was intentionally delaying repayment of money. Taylor expressed concern that Ashley might have spent the money or not want to pay it back. This made Taylor very anxious and stressed because she desperately needed the money to hire a good lawyer. That evening, Cassandra comforted Taylor, reassuring her that the matter would eventually be resolved, although she also had doubts about whether the money was still there. Taylor mentioned that she had scheduled a meeting with Ashley the next day, September 8th, to go to the bank together. On the morning of September 8th, as Cassandra was getting ready for work, she said goodbye to Taylor. And on her way out of the house, she saw Ashley's sitting car in the driveway. They were finally ready to take care of their banking issues. The girls said goodbye, and Cassandra drove off to school. Later that day, Ashley called Cassandra to inform her that she and Taylor had decided not to go to the bank, opting instead to go to the farm. This confused Cassandra, as she knew Taylor was in dire need of money. The night before, Taylor had been very stressed and emotional at dinner, eager to get her financial situation sorted out. Ashley explained that she and Taylor had been discussing Taylor's struggles. Ashley suggested that horseback riding might help Taylor improve spirit, therefore them to cancel their bank trip and plan an alternative vacation. This explanation seemed strange to Cassandra, but she wished them luck anyway. However, after the call, Cassandra attempted to contact Taylor but received no response to her calls or messages. Later on, Cassandra received a text from Taylor, who said she couldn't talk at the moment but would call back later. Taylor explained that she was feeling uncertain and depressed due to her divorce and the changes in her life, and that she was going out of town for a few days. Cassandra believed her and decided to give her friend some space. A couple of days later, Cassandra reached out again, asking Taylor to return home as soon as she could. After that, she received no response. As the days passed, Cassandra tried to contact Taylor several times, but Taylor continued to ignore her calls and texts, even though some of the messages were marked as read. Taylor did not return home, and all of her belongings were still intact, which made Cassandra increasingly worried about her friend's safety. Cassandra wanted to see Taylor to make sure she was okay. Their neighbor said that Taylor had used drugs in the past and that she could become withdrawn during difficult times. With the difficulties Taylor was having, Cassandra was worried that she might relapse. Cassandra was feeling anxious. A week had gone by with no news, and waiting seemed pointless. Concerned, her reached out to the police. She told the officers that something was off, as Taylor was behaving unusually and had completely disappeared without explanation. In their shared apartment, there were numerous personal items belonging to Taylor that she would have taken if she had moved. There was no valid reason for her to ignore her friends' calls. Until now, Taylor had never done anything like this. After hearing Cassandra's story, the police took note of the unusual aspects of the case. The police focused on the time frame of her disappearance. Naturally, they interviewed Cassandra first, since she lived in the same house as Taylor and had a close relationship with her. Meanwhile, searches were conducted in the apartment that Cassandra shared with Taylor. In the apartment, the police found Taylor's identification, some cash, and an unloaded revolver. Cassandra explained that they kept weapons in the house for self-defense, but they had never used them. There was nothing else suspicious found, but it was evident that Taylor could not have left for an extended period without her documents, money, and belongings. Cassandra was questioned several times, and she quickly felt that the police suspected her and shifted their focus to proving her innocence. Despite this, she continued to cooperate with the investigation because she wanted to find out the truth. Eventually, she was ruled out as a suspect. Police initially focused on Jeff, given their contentious divorce, which involved the division of assets and custody of their son. Jeff certainly had a strong motive to harm Taylor, but police quickly determined that he was in North Carolina at the time of her disappearance and had not left the city. He had recently remarried and was focused on building a new life, with little regard for his ex-wife. Family members confirmed that despite their divorce, Jeff and Taylor remained on good terms for the sake of their 6-year-old son. Jeff was known to be non-confrontational and had never harmed Taylor. He was not even aware that she had withdrawn money and tried to conceal it. Therefore, there was no reason for him to be angry with her, prompting police to immediately eliminate him as a potential suspect. The police then decide to talk to Ashley, whom Cassandra had mentioned. Her behavior is very unusual. They bring her in for questioning, and the police quickly notice that she is even flirting with the police, which shows that she is not at all concerned about her friend's disappearance. Ashley seems to believe that Taylor is okay. She knows that Taylor has been addicted to marijuana in the past and thinks that Taylor is not really missing but is simply indulging her addiction. Ashley speculates that after receiving some money, Taylor relapsed and went off to use. However, this explanation seems unconvincing because Ashley had previously told Cassandra about the trip to the farm, but she didn't mention that. Only when the police press her does Ashley reveal that they went to the farm because Taylor wanted to relax. During the trip, Taylor confided in her about the stress she was under from the divorce proceedings, which had affected her mental health. After some time, Taylor expressed that she was tired and wanted to go home. She called an Uber and left. Ashley reported that she hadn't seen or heard from Taylor, despite making several attempts to call her. The police were aware of a money issue that Ashley was supposed to resolve but was avoiding, leading them to suspect she was hiding something. Suddenly, Ashley started mentioning a safe deposit box and money, claiming she had no knowledge of the funds being talked about. At this point, the police were confused as there was no clear information regarding the money. Police then decided to look into text messages between her and Taylor. They discovered numerous discussions about money, with Ashley frequently postponing meetings and transferring money. In the text messages, they talked about going to the bank on September 8th to withdraw money. Police requested footage from cameras near Taylor's home. After reviewing the videos, they found the women near Taylor's apartment, which matched Cassandra's earlier account. Ashley was in a car in front of the house when Cassandra left. Taylor then left the house and left with Ashley. Using geolocation, police tracked Taylor and Ashley's movements. Police reviewed surveillance footage from across the city and saw them buying beer and food, which appeared to be normal. However, no further information about their whereabouts was available after that. Inconsistencies began to appear between Ashley's testimony. However, the police decided to release her because they did not have enough evidence against her at that time. After that, Ashley contacted the police station almost daily to check on the progress of the investigation and to see if they had any new information. She wanted to help and often recounted the details of that day, as well as places where Taylor might have gone. During the conversation, she suggested that police should search alleys and talk to people who are selling illegal substances. She believed that Taylor was simply depressed and using drugs uncontrollably, and she repeatedly urged the police to follow up on this lead. She also talked about some suspicious suspects that she had seen with Taylor. Despite Ashley's best efforts to appear concerned, but police are still investigating her connection to Taylor's disappearance. Video evidence shows that Ashley visited the bank after Taylor went missing. During that visit, she withdrew money from Taylor's card. Police are particularly concerned about any potential conflict between Ashley and Taylor. Ashley had a strong motive for her actions, the $34,000 in question. It is suspected that she deliberately delayed her response because she did not want to return the money. Fearing that Taylor might report this to the police, Ashley may have decided to eliminate her friend. With Taylor missing for such a long time, there are concerns that she is no longer alive, but this needs to be confirmed. Ashley had a significant advantage. She worked for the police department and was married to a former deputy chief of the Battery Falcons. This created a difficult situation for the officers, who could not be sure of their safety while investigating her. As a result, they chose to keep the investigation secret. In October, Ashley was called in for questioning again. As the case progressed, documentary and circumstantial evidence accumulated that linked her to Taylor's disappearance. The police noticed a marked change in Ashley's behavior. She went from being outgoing and flirtatious to being withdrawn and clearly anxious. By this time, the police had verified that most of her previous statements were lies. They presented her with clear contradictions in her testimony and began investigating the cashing of hidden checks, which were likely to have forged signatures. At the very least, this could lead to accusations of fraud, but there could be darker motives behind these actions. Ashley initially claimed that she and Taylor had gone to East Milton, where they allegedly spent the day at a farm with animals. They were last seen on surveillance footage at 11:45 a.m., which was the only footage of Taylor alive during her initial interview. She was recorded on surveillance cameras in various locations throughout the day, but she was seen alone. As the police continued to talk to Ashley, she became increasingly nervous. Her answers became more confused, and she struggled to explain the discrepancies in her story. The police obtained a search warrant for the farmhouse but found no evidence in the large area. They then asked about the checks to determine if they were indeed counterfeit. If the checks were genuine, that would mean that Taylor was still alive when Ashley went to the bank, but Ashley could not give a clear answer. She just said that the checks could be real. While examining the geolocation data on Ashley's cell phone, police discovered that she had been staying at Britt Road for an extended period of time. This was another farm owned by her family. In fact, they had been there for several hours before Taylor disappeared. Ashley again confirmed that Taylor was going to buy a truck from a dealership. But this time, she added new details to the story. She said that Taylor was going back to the farm. Ashley had not mentioned these details in her earlier statements, claiming that Taylor had asked her to keep the incident private. Ashley believed that Taylor was still alive and would come back, so she did not want to harm her reputation in front of the police. However, she lied multiple times, leading the police to lose trust in her. The police were very interested in the Ashley family farm in Britt Road. It was a large, isolated area that would have been a fit place to commit the crime and cover it up. During their questioning, the police noted another strange aspect of Ashley's behavior: why she did not contact the police immediately when Taylor promised to return but did not show up. It was clear that Taylor was in trouble and needed help. Although Ashley tried to show concern to the police, she made no effort to find Taylor. Why did she wait until she was called in for questioning to show concern? These questions remain unanswered, but the police believe that Ashley was withholding important information. After her trip to the farm with Taylor, Ashley frequently called the police station to check on the investigation into her friend's disappearance, especially after her initial interview. She was anxious to know if she was being considered a suspect. After her conversation with the police, Ashley realized that she was the prime suspect in the case. She decided to ask for a lawyer, which ended her visit to the police station. On the morning of October 19, 2017, Ashley returned home. That afternoon, police obtained a search warrant for the farm where she and Taylor had been staying. Specially trained dogs were deployed in the search, and within 2 hours, they discovered a suspicious burial site. It was a small pit that appeared to have been recently dug and had been covered with concrete. A human skull was found in a shallow grave, along with other remains that had been hastily buried in the dirt and construction debris. The victim died from a gunshot wound to the head. Due to the advanced state of decomposition, the body could not be identified at the scene. However, based on clothing and jewelry, it is believed that it was Taylor. An autopsy confirmed that the body was Taylor Wright, 30. The identification was completed using dental records and DNA analysis. Ashley was arrested that evening, October 19, 2018, and charged with premeditated murder. Ashley's defense attorney believed in her innocence, but the abundance of circumstantial evidence made it challenging to convince the jury of her non-involvement in the crime. The attorney focused on Ashley's psychological profile, portraying her as sweet, pretty, and a police officer, which seemed inconsistent with being a violent criminal. Friends and family described Ashley as quiet, modest, and incapable of murder, especially when considering her physical attributes. In contrast, Taylor was physically stronger, leading the prosecution to question the defense's arguments. The lawyer developed his strategy based on the fact that the police lacked direct evidence to prove Ashley's guilt. There was no murder weapon, no witnesses, and no DNA linking Ashley to the body. This made it difficult for the prosecutor's office to connect Ashley to the crime. One witness was the victim's ex-husband, Jeff. He stated that he reached out to Ashley a few days after his Taylor went missing, trying to locate her to address some matters related to their marriage and divorce. Jeff contacted Ashley via social media. She claimed that the last time she saw Taylor was when she was exchanging money. She expressed concern about whether Taylor had arrived safely. This was a new detail that Ashley had never mentioned before, leading the police to realize that she was a pathological liar who had deceived everyone around her. Although Jeff was initially investigated and cleared as a suspect due to a solid alibi, he still had a strong motive. The lawyer attempted to redirect the jury's attention to Jeff's possible involvement in his ex-wife's murder. But these efforts were unsuccessful. The testimonies from Ashley's close friends greatly influenced the jury. They revealed that the Ashley was not as she seemed. She frequently visited a strip club. Bartenders and staff stated that just before Taylor went missing, Ashley spoke negatively about Taylor. Later, a gun associated with Taylor's death was discovered in Ashley's house. After new evidence emerged, the Ashley admitted to spiking Taylor's beer with a strong substance. However, when Taylor took a sip, she noticed the drink tasted odd and clearly spoiled. She spat it out and refused to drink any more, which likely led to the failure of Ashley's poisoning plan. Despite this admission, Ashley denied any involvement in the shooting of her friend. The prosecution argued that she had a strong motive. Ashley was holding on to a large sum of Taylor's money and was delaying returning it. Taylor desperately needed the money to pay her lawyer, so if Ashley delayed paying, Taylor would likely report the matter to the police. This situation gave Ashley a motive to get rid of her friend. The police later discovered the reason for the delay in returning the money. Ashley had been secretly having an affair with a man named Brandon, without her husband's knowledge. It was revealed that she had spent all of the money on Brandon, including giving him a motorcycle just weeks before Taylor went missing. This coincided with the time she had received money from Taylor. In court, Brandon admitted that Ashley had frequently given him expensive gifts, but he did not know where she got the money, as she had no other source for such a large sum of money. The police tracked Ashley's movements and discovered that she had gone to Home Depot after Taylor went missing. The police spoke to a sales clerk who confirmed that Ashley had purchased several bags of quick-drying solution. When the substance found in Taylor's grave was tested, it matched the quick-drying compound mentioned by the hardware store employee. This suggests that Ashley attempted to quickly hide Taylor's body on the farm to avoid detection. However, Ashley's attorney argued that she was not physically able to carry the heavy bags, dig the grave, and move Taylor's body. The jury then deliberated for about 4 hours and found Ashley MacArthur guilty of first-degree murder. She was sentenced to life in prison, eligible for parole after 25 years. She also served an additional 7 years for fraud related to Taylor Wright's finances. Hello, crime enthusiasts, are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Brianna Nugent. Brianna grew up in Hayden, Alabama, USA. Her friendly personality helped her make many friends. She doesn't care about boys at school. Instead, she devotes herself to her studies with the goal of becoming a nurse. After graduating high school, she enrolled in a nursing program at Wallace Community College. There, she met Stephen Nix, who was known to enjoy drinking and gambling. He was not concerned about having a stable job and often acted irresponsibly. Stephen worked as a cleaner at the medical center where Brianna was interning, and he seemed uninterested in improving his life. Despite their differences, they began dating, and at one point, Brianna moved into his house, where he lived with his parents. However, after a while, Stephen admitted to Brianna that he was having an affair with a coworker. This revelation shocked Brianna, leading her to end the relationship. She then focused on her studies and successfully earned her nursing degree. During the following year, Stephen repeatedly tried to reach out to her, pleading for another chance and promising he would never cheat again. Eventually, Brianna relented and agreed to give him another opportunity. They later got married and both started working to save money for their first home. The problem started when Stephen lost his job as a cleaner. He attempted to find another job but had difficulty maintaining any position for long. After several attempts, he eventually stopped looking for work altogether. His daily routine began to mirror that of a teenager. He spent his nights playing computer games and slept until the evening. Although Brianna had a good income, but Stephen, who was not contributing financially, took control of the family budget. Brianna had to ask him for every dollar she needed for basic necessities, often pleading with him for even essential items and food. However, Stephen didn't control his spending, so he ended up in debt of about $50,000. To address this issue, he persuaded Brianna to declare bankruptcy. At that point, he had such control over her that she felt she couldn't refuse. In 2019, they went through with this plan, and the debts were eliminated, but it took a big toll on Brianna, leaving her morally exhausted. The stress caused by Stephen led her to depression, requiring expensive medications. After a few months, she was offered a life insurance policy at work, which depended on her income as a nurse. When she brought it up to Stephen, he agreed it was a good idea. By February 2020, Stephen was still unemployed and was heavily reliant on Brianna. She started to suspect that he might betray her again and feared he was using illegal drugs. To protect herself, Brianna hid her medications from him, but he continued to control her finances and her life. She felt trapped in a toxic relationship and was unsure how to escape, fearing her parents would judge her for wasting time on someone unworthy. Ultimately, she only confided in a few close friends and her sister, sharing her intention to file for divorce. On March 2, 2020, around noon, Stephen called 911, claiming he found his wife, Brianna, unresponsive in the bathroom. The dispatchers instructed him to perform CPR, but throughout the call, he made no attempt to help his wife. Instead, he focused on telling his version of incident while ignoring their instructions. 5 minutes later, when paramedics arrived, a county sheriff's deputy and some of Stephen's family members were already present. It was unusual that an officer, who was supposed to be half an hour away from the incident, arrived even before the paramedics. The Stephen family lived far away, yet they arrived at his house very quickly. Soon after, Brianna's relatives also arrived. Stephen called his mother and sister at 12:20 p.m. after the ambulance had arrived. He informed them that Brianna had ended her life and said he had witnessed similar things in the past. His family was shocked and rushed to the house. The medics tried to revive Brianna, but it was too late. By the time the ambulance arrived, she was already cold, indicating that she had been dead for several hours. A syringe with an 18mm needle was found nearby, leading to speculation that Brianna may have died from an overdose of illegal drugs. Stephen explained that his wife's body had already cooled down when he found her. He said he was preparing to go outside when he heard a loud noise from the bathroom, which sounded like something had fallen. He dismissed it, thinking it was just mobile phone. After going shopping and returning about an hour later, he went upstairs and found his wife lifeless. Brianna's family rejected the idea that her death was due to an overdose. They frequently communicated with her and did not see any signs of substance abuse. As a nurse, Brianna was subject to random screenings for alcohol and illegal drugs at work, and her results were consistently negative. Her colleagues also expressed disbelief, stating they could not imagine her using anything harmful. When Brianna's relatives arrived, they observed that Stephen appeared calm and not overly concerned about the situation. He was even cleaning the bathroom. However, his demeanor changed dramatically, and he became nervous once police officers arrived. While the police were focused on investigating the crime scene, Stephen took a bag of collected garbage from the bathroom and threw it into his pickup truck instead of the trash bin. When the police requested access to Brianna's mobile phone, Stephen refused. However, her sister was able to unlock the phone and discovered that Stephen's last call to Brianna was made at 7:53, a time when he usually would still be asleep after a night of playing video games. When questioned by the police, Stephen claimed he had called her number just to tease her, but he did not explain the nature of the joke. Additionally, at 12:02, after calling 911, Stephen inexplicably sent a text message to Brianna. He could not explain why he would text someone who had already passed away. He also refused to allow the police to inspect his car. After learning that he had thrown the garbage bag away, the investigator had to return to the station to obtain a warrant. This inadvertently allowed Stephen time to get rid of the evidence. He quickly got rid of the garbage and erased any traces of his actions. The crime scene was thoroughly cleaned by the next day, when Brianna's relatives arrived to gather items for the burial. Brianna's sister was shocked to discover that Brianna didn't even own nice underwear. This seemed odd. It also shows that her husband does not allow her to spend any money on herself. The following day, Stephen called Brianna's sister, Brittany, and invited her to his home for a discussion. When she arrived, his relatives were already there. He showed her 2 empty bottles of opioid painkillers and a bag of syringes. Stephen claimed he found these items in a drawer of Brianna's belongings, suggesting she died from a drug overdose due to a long-standing addiction. However, this medication can only be prescribed by prescription, and it certainly does not belong to Brianna. Brittany was sure that Stephen was lying. After Brianna's death, Brittany and her mother went through Brianna's things and didn't find anything missing. They would have been aware if anything was gone. Then, Stephen showed Brittany another drawer that had Brianna's underwear in it. He claimed to have found more evidence there that Brittany and her mother had overlooked. At that point, Brittany started to think that Stephen might have been involved in Brianna's death, and she no longer wanted to listen to him. Brittany went to the funeral home to style her deceased younger sister's hair and makeup, Brianna, despite strong objections from Stephen's family. Upon arriving, she quickly realized why they were so concerned. She discovered her sister's body covered in numerous fresh bruises and over 80 injection marks, some new and others starting to heal. At the time of her death, Brianna was a certified nurse and knew how to administer injections properly. If she had a secret substance addiction, her level of bruising is also not normal. Additionally, some injection sites were located in where Brianna couldn't have reached herself without assistance. They also found signs of trauma on her palms, resembling defensive wounds. The condition of the needle marks indicated they were inflicted about 8 to 12 hours before her death. The nature of some injuries suggested that someone had restrained Brianna while administering the injections. This case cannot be considered end your own life, and it feels like the police are against Brianna. Brittany was able to take several photos of the Brianna body before being removed from the funeral home. She collected crucial evidence indicating that Brianna had died a tragic death. Brittany suspected that Brianna's husband, Stephen, was responsible. At Brianna's funeral, Stephen did not speak to anyone or offer any greetings. He attempted to fake tears but ultimately had none, and many attendees noticed he appeared very unnatural. Several witnesses said Stephen bragged about connections that could help him evade justice, he even speaking with a mourner who turned out to be a police officer from another city, but he quickly ended the conversation when he realized this. At that time, no one was aware that the deputy sheriff who arrived at the scene before everyone else was related to Stephen. Brianna's sister discovered that this deputy was not included in the investigation records, despite having full access to the crime scene. In October 2020, an investigator contacted Brianna's family to inform them that she had been the victim of a crime. The investigator suggested that she may have been killed because she witnessed another crime and was killed as an unintended witness. However, this theory was never confirmed, and the investigation was eventually closed. Stephen continued to live in the home he shared with his late wife, Brianna. Just a few days after Brianna's death, Stephen's longtime mistress moved in with him. They even renamed Brianna's favorite dogs. He received $160,000 in life insurance money from Brianna's death. Stephen rarely left the house and continued to live a childish lifestyle, spending the insurance money on video games, pouring concrete in front of the house, buying expensive car parts, and acquiring weapons and gifts for his lover. Stephen showered lover with lavish gifts, including jewelry and ostrich leather boots. However, he was unable to afford a tombstone for Brianna's until 6 months later, and this only happened after her relatives pressured him to do so. Brianna's family was appalled by his actions from the start. They sought justice for her by filing complaints with the police and other authorities, but their efforts were in vain. The case was closed, labeled as an accident, and no investigation was conducted to gather evidence or identify suspects. Brianna's family continued to appeal to higher authorities, requesting that the police reopen the investigation, but they were told it was under the jurisdiction of a different police station. The Brianna's family is concerned that Stephen's connections are obstructing the investigation. Despite this, Brianna's sister remained persistent, and the case was reopened. Unfortunately, it was soon discovered that all the evidence had been lost, and no thorough examinations had been conducted during prior investigations. Stephen is still withholding crucial case information from Brianna's sister and mother. Although he claims that access to the medical report from the pathologist is restricted until an official conclusion is reached, this is misleading. He is aware of the report's contents, raising questions about his motives. Eventually, the Brianna's family hired a private detective who was able to uncover various materials. One significant find was video footage from a search of Stephen's car and home, which showed him smiling brightly while leaning over Brianna's lifeless body. Following the public revelation of this footage, Stephen became fearful and installed security cameras around the house. Meanwhile, Brianna's sister Brittany continues to search for evidence that proves Stephen was involved in her younger sister's death. Brittany sent a photo of a package of fentanyl to Brianna's co-workers, who firmly stated that the medicine package did not come from the hospital, as they had never seen such drugs before. It was later revealed that a different drug from another manufacturer was used at their workplace, which had different packaging. This contradicted Stephen's earlier claim that Brianna had become addicted to drugs at work. Moreover, an official request from a medical institution confirmed that Brianna could not have stolen the drugs, as their records were strictly monitored. The large needles found in Brianna's home were not typically used for such drugs, and Brianna, a nurse, was aware of this. Additionally, Brianna's family received a toxicology report about 4 months after her death. The report revealed that her body contained high levels of various psychotropic substances. including of antidepressants and fentanyl, almost double the lethal dose. The Brianna's family believes that Brianna, given her experience with medications, would not have made such a mistake or acted carelessly. When Brittany spoke to the medical examiner responsible for the autopsy and the cause of death determination, he mentioned that the conclusions in the autopsy report heavily relied on the circumstances surrounding the death. They reviewed reports from investigative agencies like the sheriff's office and the coroner's office. Brianna's death certificate states that the immediate cause of death was an overdose, and it categorizes her death as an accident. However, achieving justice remains difficult. The Brianna's family initiated a petition to raise public awareness, which could have helped with legal and social expenses. Unfortunately, they only raised $5,000 instead of the needed $20,000, leaving the majority of the financial burden on Brianna's family. The case is over. Justice has not been served. We will follow the new details of the case in the future. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Rachel McLean. Rachel McLean returned home to Blackpool, UK, for the summer of 1990. She was 18 years old and had just finished her first year at Oxford. Rachel was very busy with her studies and spent all her free time studying. She had a healthy lifestyle and played sports. Rachel had many friends and loved heavy metal music. She joined a local charity where she worked during the summer. While on a day off, Rachel was relaxing with friends at a local club when she met a bartender named John Turner, who had long brown hair. John was from Nottingham and had returned to Blackpool for the summer. Rachel found him attractive and easy to talk to, so they quickly became interested in each other. That night, they chatted. John attended Rachel's 19th birthday party. After the party, they had a passionate night together. According to John, their relationship continued to develop. However, at the end of the summer, Rachel had to return to Oxford, and John returned to Nottingham. The two cities were just over 2 hours' drive apart, so they could easily visit each other. They spent weekends together and kept in touch by letter and phone during the week. John wrote Rachel long love letters, which she enjoyed. John Turner was born in HMP, but as a child he moved to New Zealand with his parents and settled in a city called Bath. The family lived in 2 countries before John returned to the UK to study at King's College. During his time there, he won the hearts of both students and teachers. He hosted a show on the local college radio station twice a week and was a talented athlete on the soccer team. Rachel McLean was a promising student. Her literature teacher at college admired her achievements. Rachel started college in the same year as John. On Christmas, Rachel invited John to meet her parents and they had a nice evening together. Rachel's parents were very happy with her choice, finding John intelligent, good-looking and confident. John became increasingly infatuated with Rachel but was saddened by the distance between them. During this time, she moved into a student apartment on the first floor of the school with 4 other students. John felt anxious and jealous because one of her neighbors was a man and the boys often visited her house. To cope, he wrote and called her constantly. However, Rachel was very busy with work and study. Since there were no mobile phones in those days, they could only communicate by landline. She would often come home at the end of the evening, exhausted, and go straight to bed. She did not have the opportunity to communicate with John regularly. His dissatisfaction increased with each missed call and he became increasingly jealous. His possessiveness became evident during this time and he complained to her, which began to annoy Rachel. On February 11th, she sent him a Valentine's card, calling him the only love of her life. However, around that time, she wrote in her diary about her lover in very unflattering terms. It seemed that she had doubts about whether John was the person she could spend the rest of her life with. On Valentine's Day, John proposed to her, but she unexpectedly refused, which shocked him. She explained that she was not ready. John said that he understood and would wait. They continued their relationship, calling each other occasionally and rarely seeing each other. 2 months later, in April, they planned to spend the Easter holidays together. John went to Blackpool again on Saturday, and Rachel's mother took her back to Oxford because she had important school matters to attend to on Sunday. They planned to have a quiet day together at her student flat, as it was their last weekend before Rachel's exams. Rachel spent a lot of time preparing for her exams. While she was studying, her boyfriend was watching football in the living room because he was a Nottingham fan. That weekend, the team played in the FA Cup semi-finals, so the next day John got on the train and returned to Nottingham. There was no one in the student flat all week because the young people had gone home for the holidays. Everyone wanted to spend time with their loved ones because they wouldn't have the chance until the end of the year. By Monday, her roommates began to return, eager to see Rachel and hear about her weekend. However, Rachel was missing. Her room was empty, the windows were open, but nothing else seemed out of the ordinary. The students assumed she was busy with other activities. On Wednesday, her boyfriend, John, tried to call her, but she did not answer. They had planned to stay in touch, but Rachel did not return his calls. John assumed that she was busy and did not want to bother her. However, after 2 days of silence, which was unusual since their relationship had only recently improved, John began to worry. He called again, but still received no response. The next day, he tried again, but was unsuccessful. There was no social media at the time, so John left a message on her answering machine. But she remained silent. He also sent her a letter by regular mail, which he sent as soon as he got home. The letter arrived in New Mexico on Thursday, and John thanked Rachel for a wonderful weekend and wished her luck with her exams. On April 19, 1991, 19-year-old Rachel failed to show up for her exam, which was especially worrying because she had been studying hard and the exam was extremely important to her. When the exam proctors tried to contact her, they were unsuccessful. Her parents also had no idea where she was, prompting them to report her missing to the police. The Oxford police were initially skeptical. They received dozens of missing student reports each month because parents went to the police station after parties. In 99% of cases, teens sobered up from drinking and returned to school within 24 hours. But that was not the case. This diligent student had been missing for days and had not been heard from at all. None of her friends knew where she was, so the police became interested in what had happened. They immediately went to the apartment where Rachel had gone missing. Detective Susie Krug was looking for information about the students who had been in the same room as Rachel. Victoria Clare, Margaret Smith, Sarah Hume, and John Forby. The friends immediately pointed to Rachel's boyfriend, who was annoying everyone with his jealousy. They showed a letter he had sent from Nottingham around the time Rachel went missing. The neighbors also confirmed that John Turner was the last person Rachel had been in contact with. The room they checked showed no signs of forced entry, robbery, struggle, or blood. Everything was in its place. The police found Rachel's diary, which might contain important clues. The police began to study the contents of the diary. They knew that John was possessive and jealous of his girlfriend, wanting to know her whereabouts and presence at all times. This behavior gradually began to annoy Rachel. Their conflicts often arose over this issue. On April 22, police met with John Turner. 22. During the conversation, John expressed concern about his missing girlfriend. He was asked to describe his activities during the time Rachel went missing. John mentioned that they had a great weekend together and that everything was fine before they broke up. He said that he woke up early, showered, and that they had sex in the afternoon. After lunch, they went to Oxford Station together at around 4:15 p.m., taking a bus. They had a few hours before their train arrived, and while waiting, they bumped into a friend of Rachel's at around 5 p.m. The three of them went to a local coffee shop and had coffee. Rachel's friend was described as a dark-skinned man with long hair, wearing ripped jeans and a black jacket. He was similar in appearance to John, except for his dark skin. John admitted that he could not remember the man's name because they had just met and he did not expect to become friends with him. According to John, the man offered to drive Rachel home in his car. She agreed, and then John and Rachel said goodbye. John returned to Nottingham, while Rachel went with her friend to her apartment. However, John's story about the man was very suspicious. The police suspected that John was lying, and he quickly became the prime suspect in Rachel's disappearance, as she had been missing for a long time, leading to concerns that she might be dead or imprisoned. Urgent action was needed. First, it was important to learn more about the prime suspect, as he was the last known person to have had contact with Rachel, and his story about a black man needed further investigation. Rachel's disappearance left everyone baffled because none of her roommates or friends remembered her having such a friend. In order to gather more witnesses, the police shared information about the case. From the beginning, there was no reason to think that she had run away. The police first checked this possibility by talking to Rachel's family and friends. Rachel had no problems with her loved ones, friends, studies, or personal life. She was eagerly preparing for exams, which made it impossible for her to not attend. Rachel never complained about any problems, nor did she suffer from drug addiction or mental problems. People like her usually do not run away, and all of her belongings were left untouched. This allowed the police to rule out the possibility that she had run away on purpose. The police were skeptical of John's testimony and assigned a police officer to approach him and gain his trust. The officer's job was to observe John's reactions and behavior while updating him on the investigation. From the beginning, the officer suspected John of lying to them, noticing that he became nervous when talking about Rachel, despite his attempts to hide it. Despite these suspicions, a week of surveillance did not reveal any useful information to help the case. Meanwhile, the police were searching the neighborhood for witnesses, K9 units were working with dogs, and divers were examining local waters. Several people remembered seeing John, but no one could confirm that he had left the house with Rachel. In addition, he had not been behaving suspiciously, so this witness's testimony did not add anything to the search. During this time, John continued to cooperate with the investigation. He even helped create a composite sketch of the man who, according to him, was supposed to drive Rachel back to her apartment. John believes this friend was responsible for her abduction. It has now been 2 weeks and police believe she is no longer alive. No ransom demands have been made, ruling out kidnapping as a motive. Search teams, including police, rescue workers, and volunteers, have scoured a large area around Oxford, including drains and boating holes, but their efforts have been in vain. The police examined Rachel's diary and discovered her true feelings for John, a disturbing mix of hatred and pity. She expressed that she was unable to confront him directly or leave because she was afraid. Rachel had no genuine feelings for John, and her Valentine's Day gestures were more like a duty than a genuine expression of love. She knew that John was unstable and prone to losing control when angry. Afraid to face this reality, she admitted that their closeness was harmful and needed to end. In stark contrast, John described their relationship as happy, often emphasizing their frequent sexual activity during interrogations. Meanwhile, Rachel wrote of her disgust for him but felt powerless to stop their closeness. The police believe he may have killed her after reading her diary and discovering her true feelings, but more evidence is needed to prove his guilt. John has been actively cooperating with the investigation. He has attended a press conference to draw public attention to the search for Rachel and to help reconstruct the last day he spent with her. John describes the events at the station, claiming that a stranger, whom he says was a dark-skinned friend of Rachel's, was involved in her disappearance. The plan is to closely monitor John's reactions and behavior during these events, as experienced journalists can identify inconsistencies in his story. Many people have noted that John's description of the dark-skinned guy closely matches his appearance, including his clothing, except for his skin color. It is as if he was trying to describe himself but changing his race. In addition, the public took note of John's strange reactions when asked if he thought Rachel was still alive. He vaguely stated, in his heart, he wanted to think so, which further aroused suspicion among the conference attendees. Throughout the conversation, the guy's smile never seemed to disappear. This event greatly promoted the investigation into Rachel's disappearance. Several random witnesses who were watching the press conference on television clearly remembered the events of the day the girl disappeared at the train station. They contacted the police, saying that only John was at the cafe at the station, there was no girl or anyone else with him. Among the witnesses was a man sitting at the next table. He noticed that John seemed very nervous while drinking coffee, constantly looking around and startled. According to this witness, at one point, John took out a piece of paper and started writing. Perhaps Rachel was no longer alive at that time, and John began writing the same letter he had sent immediately after arriving in Noting. All this was done to create an alibi for himself. It has been established that John and Rachel went to the station together by bus, although there were no cameras there at that time. However, during that time in the city, all passengers who boarded the bus and paid for their tickets were monitored by special electronic devices. It was impossible to ride without paying. When checked, it was discovered that Rachel had not paid for the trip, which showed that she was not with John and could not have been there that day. Therefore, John lied. The reason for his lie remains unclear, and it is still unknown where Rachel's body could be. Police suspected that her remains might still be in the student apartment or somewhere on campus. Surveillance cameras covered the area around the building, but none of them showed John carrying any large, suspicious items. Police requested a floor plan of the student dormitory and discovered that there were voids under the floorboards. Police returned to the apartment where Rachel had lived and removed the floorboards. There, they found her body tightly packed in a bag, only 20 centimeters high. The cold weather at the time slowed the body's decomposition. In addition, the space between floors was structurally well ventilated, so the decomposing body did not emit a foul odor and was not discovered until 19 days after her death. Because Rachel's body was so well preserved, the forensic expert was able to determine the circumstances of her death with a high degree of accuracy within an hour. John was then questioned by the police. Initially, he refused to answer police questions. However, the next day, he confessed to killing Rachel. He said that after watching a football match, he proposed to Rachel, hoping that she would accept, but she refused. The couple exchanged a few words. As a result, he lost his temper and attacked her. In his confession, John admitted that he did not understand why she refused to get engaged. She did not want to answer for a long time but finally admitted that she had been having an affair and that she was not sure that she was ready to commit her life to John. In response, he insulted her. Rachel tried to hit him, and after the slap, he lost control and pinned her down on the chair with his weight, preventing her from moving. John claimed that he did not remember what happened next. When he regained consciousness, he found himself sitting on a couch in front of Rachel's lifeless body. Forensic experts confirmed that Rachel had been strangled. There was a deep, thin mark on her neck, indicating the use of an object rather than hands. The tie Rachel had given him for Christmas was missing from the crime scene and from John's belongings, believed to have been used to kill her. After a while, he decided to dispose of the body. Unable to get the body out of the building, he put it in a bag, removed the floorboards from Rachel's room, and stuffed the body into a small space. He then quietly reinstalled the floorboards. John then packed his things and headed to the bus station. While waiting for the train at a coffee shop, he wrote a letter to Rachel. In the letter, he thanked her for the weekend they spent together and mentioned a black man who was supposed to drive her home, which was a made-up story. He had invented this character to support the lie he had created. He also expressed concern for his girlfriend, who would be alone for several days. After sending the letter, he called her several times and left messages on her answering machine. John then wrote another letter, addressed to Rachel in New Mexico, saying that he had tried to call her several times during the week and was very worried, hoping she would call back soon. This deception allowed him to fool the police and the public for 19 days. Afterward, despite his confession, John Turner maintained his innocence. In December 1991, John claimed that his actions were in self-defense. He wanted to avoid a life sentence for premeditated murder, so he argued that the girl's death was accidental. Rachel was described as argumentative and unfaithful, often insulting John. John also stressed the humiliation he suffered at the hands of Rachel. He had erectile dysfunction due to the disease and claimed that she constantly criticized him for it. This was especially difficult during the outbreak when he was unable to have sex with her due to pain in his groin and abdomen. In court, his lawyer portrayed him as the victim. He was a caring man in love, dreamed of marrying Rachel and proposed to her twice, both times being rejected. Of course, all of this is not true, because judging by the diary entries, the girl was generally uncomfortable with intimate contact with John. There is no evidence that Rachel had any intrigue or relationship with anyone else. Rachel's close friends did not know about any other guy. Many believe that she made up the story of the affair to justify her quick breakup with John, but it is possible that she never actually said this, it was just his word. In the end, the jury did not believe John and he was sentenced to life in prison, with the right to parole. John's story does not end there. While serving his sentence, he developed a relationship with a 20-year-old woman who looked exactly like Rachel. She learned about him through a newspaper article and became interested, believing that he had been wrongly convicted. Despite being imprisoned, they began a romantic relationship. Lawyers continued to fight for John's release and maintained his innocence. In 2003, after 11 years behind bars, John was paroled. He returned to New Zealand, intending to start his life over. His girlfriend, whom he met while in prison, followed him to New Zealand to attend university in Whanganui, the city where John lived. Apparently, 11 years in prison did not benefit John because he then attacked and began strangling the new girl, who believed he was innocent. John was 49 at the time. Fortunately, the attack was not serious and the girl was able to escape without serious injury. According to several witnesses and victims, John had lost control of his temper several times in the 6 months leading up to the incident. It was clear that he had anger management issues. John often became jealous and turned small problems into big arguments, often insulting his partner in front of others. Some time after the initial incident, the situation recurred and he attacked her again. During this time, the couple were staying at a motel in the city of Whanganui. There, they argued again. John threw his girlfriend onto the bed, raised his fists and punched her in the face while holding her down with his weight. However, he regained his composure and left the room. A few hours later, the girl texted John, saying that she was ending the relationship. She said that he was dangerous and needed to attend an anger management program. In response, he flew into a rage again, returned to the motel and stormed into the room. He attacked her, tore her clothes off, demanded sex, hit her on the head several times and threatened to kill her. In 2018, the girl reported John to the police and he was charged with assault. He was sentenced to 2 years and 9 months in prison. The sentence was relatively light because the conviction occurred in New Zealand. If the attack had happened in the UK, he would have faced a life sentence. Despite the attack, his new girlfriend told the media that she believes anger management is still an issue for John and that he needs help. She hopes he can control his anger and that they can rekindle their relationship, despite the mental and physical abuse he has inflicted on her. In court, she admitted that he had threatened to kill her if she tried to leave him, although she did not take the threats seriously. John has recently been released from prison, but his current situation is unknown.